Ken? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Minutes of the council meeting on February the 11th. Any errors or omissions? Steve?
I'll move the minutes of February 11th, Mr. Chairman.
Any discussion? Call for the question. Those in favor? Those opposed? Carried. Thanks, Steve. The minutes of the joint public hearing of with the town of Colehurst held on February the 25th. Any errors or omissions? Claus?
I'll move the minutes of the Colehurst County meeting.
Any discussion? Seeing none, call question. Those in favor? Those opposed? Carried. Subdivision applications, or are we doing something else first?
We're doing the public.
We're doing the which? Oh. Okay. It's a, okay, a Ridge Utilities, or it's a presentation for what they're all about. And you know everybody, don't you? Or you want us to introduce ourselves?
No, we can do it.
Okay, Lauren Hickey, I'm the counselor for Division 1, and Reeve. Claus?
I'm Councillor Van der Veen. I'm Division 6.
Bob Horvath, Division 3.
Tory Campbell, Councillor, Division 2.
Steve Campbell, Division 5.
Mark Jacobs, Division 7. Ken Benson, Division 4.
Well, good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to be with you today. I think most of you know that I'm Trevor Lewington, but I'm here today wearing the hat of Mayor of the Village of Sterling and a Director with Ridge Utilities. And with me today is Scott Donslar, who is the CEO in Sterling, but also by default and by sort of being voluntold, the General Manager of Ridge Utilities. So appreciate the opportunity to be with you here today. Inside of your package there is a presentation, and I'm hoping we can bring that up, and I can walk you through that.
We all got it.
We all got it, but,
Oh, we got it, okay.
or do you want it on the screen? or-
Yeah, if we could do that, probably a little easier.
Morris?
Can I just give it a try here?
Yeah, thanks, sir.
You're welcome. I'm not sure.
You can go to the website and pull it up that way.
No, I was gonna make him put it up on the screen.
Okay, here we go. So today's meeting. Okay, and you've got some attachments
Yeah,
there,
just
right?
right there. If the,
Right,
the link. Perfect.
I think we're in.
Okay,
There we go.
that is awesome. Thanks, Larry. So here to give you a quick overview on Ridge Utilities, and more importantly, who we are, what we're doing, and why that matters to this audience. We have had some time with your administrative team to give them some of the background information, but we appreciate the opportunity to be here today to provide you with a bit more information. So we'll talk a little bit about, again, the organization, what we're up to, but a couple of things that I think may be of interest in particular is the Marketing Associate Program, as well as our partnership with Greenbrier Capital. So I'll walk you through each of those, and then of course we'd be happy to answer any questions that you have. So Ridge Utilities is a municipally controlled corporation. So it's something that we stood up in October of last year. The Village of Sterling is the sole shareholder in that municipally controlled corporation. And for the first year, the board of directors will consist of council. These are public funds, of course, so we want to make sure there's accountability there. But over time, we plan to replace councillors with members of the general public who have the appropriate business background. This is a corporation, it is a for-profit, so therefore it should be managed as such. We're working with an Alberta-based company, UtilityNet. So they are actually registered as an energy retailer with the province and through the Alberta Utilities Commission. And Ridge Utilities is an energy marketer of UtilityNet. There are 23 other energy marketers similar to Ridge Utilities across the province, but we're actually the only one south of Calgary. So that's the structure. Why that's interesting to us, of course, is that we market natural gas, electricity, and internet services. So we can serve residential, commercial, and agricultural customers. And the great thing about UtilityNet and our partnership is they have a number of very unique programs like a solar club that allow people with microgeneration systems to access a very competitive and high-paying rate, as well as the opportunity to purchase green energy through renewable energy credits to green their energy sources. And essentially, because of Alberta's deregulated market, we can serve any community anywhere in the province that is not served by an REA or a gas co-op. So that pretty much leaves it pretty open to the rest of the geography of the province and many, many potential customers. So as an example, it's pretty easy to navigate, but that next slide shows what the homepage of the website actually looks like. So again, it's very simple for people to navigate. Are you interested in internet? Are you looking at solar? Are you looking at natural gas? People simply have to go in there and pick the service. There's a number of FAQs, frequently asked questions. There's information on our Air Miles program. There's information on how to access your account. Again, it's meant to be fairly straightforward and fairly easy to navigate. One of the things that we think may be of particular interest to this organization is the fact that you do have a solar array, of course, on this building. You do qualify as what is called a small microgenerator. And last year you produced almost 99 megawatt hours of power. Typically, as a microgenerator, you would receive back as credits exactly the same as what you pay. So let's say, for example, you're paying 6 cents per kilowatt hour on your bills today, which is sort of what the market was last year. Every time you generate a kilowatt hour on your system, that's what you receive back as your credit. Our solar club system, and it's since been updated as of midnight tonight, but the high rate is actually 25 cents. So in the summer months where you're generating more than you can consume, on our plan you actually receive 25 cents back for every kilowatt hour that you produce. And in the wintertime when you're typically consuming more than you generate, you can flip back to a low rate of 7.1 cents. So for people that do already have existing solar arrays, it's a way to maximize your ROI. So the Village of Sterling, as you may know, is a net zero community. We have enough solar generation to offset all of our municipal consumption. And this high-low rate and the ability to switch will generate for us an incremental $40,000 to $50,000 a year. So that's a pretty significant income stream for the village. And again, that's something we'd like to help you model if that's of interest. And again, it's something that you can, it's just math, looking at your consumption, looking at your previous power bills to understand whether that benefits the county. So you could potentially become a customer, and in particular, we think the solar rate might be, that solar club rate might be of interest. You know, why we're doing this, first of all, I mean, selfishly, as the shareholder, the Village of Sterling wins. This is an innovative revenue stream for us. We're fortunate now to have marketing associates across the region, and that's a growing network for us. So as the shareholder, clearly we want to drive revenue into our community. We also plan on having a community investment fund, so profits and proceeds from the operation of this municipal corporation will be set aside, and we will be investing in the communities where our customers live. So as the density of customers in a certain area dictates, that's where our priorities for funding community projects will be. But ultimately, we also want our residents and our businesses to win. So we purposely have chosen lower administration rates, for example. Village of Sterling, our particular account, we were through AMSC and RMA. We were paying up to $20 a month per site in administration charges. Our current monthly administration is $6.95. So over our 20+ sites, that in and of itself is a pretty significant savings. So we're able to do some things that some of the larger incumbent utility companies can't do, and we think that's beneficial for residents as well. We've also been working with our neighboring communities. We see this as a bit of a pilot for other municipally controlled corporations. So for example, we've partnered with the town of McGrath and the town of Raymond, who are joined us as marketing associates. They're selling this program. They're earning a commission for doing so. The town of Raymond has formed a municipally controlled corporation to do land development. That's not an area of expertise for our community, so we plan on contracting their corporation to do the same. Some of the other discussions in the region are things like a paving company, not to compete with the large-scale highway, sort of the main incumbent contractors, but each of the communities around here spends a couple of $100,000 a year doing paving, yet we're paying full market rates, and we're also paying full retail because it's a low quantity and ad hoc. What if all of those communities got together and were shareholders in a municipal corporation? So we see Ridge Utilities as a bit of a pilot for some of these other potential municipal corps. And I will say that I'm a firm believer that government should not be in the business of being in business. There are, however, exceptions, and we think this is one. And it's a proven model in that, EPCOR is owned by the City of Edmonton, NMAX is owned by the City of Calgary. It's kind of the same game that we're into here. So the basic ask for your organization is, first of all, if you have a business directory or utility information page, community newsletter, we'd like to be listed. We typically know that when residents come to a community or move, the county hall, the county office is usually the first place they go to arrange utilities and things. We'd like our information to be available to them amongst all the list of other providers. We'd like your help with your staff and within your community to help spread the word. Again, these are dollars. Every dollar we generate stays in our region, and we'd like the ability to reinvest here. Many other incumbents that are in the power and energy sector are either based in another province or based in another country. So, of course, we want to keep as many of those dollars local as possible. Buying local is more important than ever in our view. Also, something that may be of interest is our marketing associate program. And so this is basically our way of growing our sales force without actually having a sales force. We have the ability to tap into UtilityNet's proven method in terms of their marketing materials and some of their own things. And although we have, as I said, a couple of providers that are in that space, so the town of McGrath and the town of Raymond are in fact marketing to their own residents through this program. They're not bound by any specific geography. We can compete, like I said, anywhere in the province of Alberta. And in fact, later this week, we'll be signing a marketing associate who's based in Cochrane. So we'll be creating a foothold for ourselves in the Calgary market, which of course expands our reach pretty significantly. What you get as a part of this program is a customized landing page, which I'll show you an example of in a moment. Secure online forums that track all of this. This is pretty turnkey. It's pretty low effort. Professionally crafted marketing materials, there's training materials, and of course monthly revenue reporting. So it's all fairly automated on the back end, and that's all managed by UtilityNet. So Raymond launched the week of February the 3rd. You can see an example of their landing page. So it references Ridge Utilities. It has the same look and feel as our main website, but you'll notice in the top right-hand corner, it specifically references the town of Raymond, that's actually who you're talking to. So the town of McGrath looks a little similar. They launched last week. We have the Milk River Cable Club being added to that collection either this week or next week. And like I said, proactive energy solutions in Calgary, Cochrane being added after that. So again, we continue to grow the program. An example of some of the marketing support, so Air Miles is a partner of UtilityNet. We're able to tap into that program. Air Miles, as you may know, is sometimes prohibitively expensive and complex for smaller retailers to be able to use that loyalty program. So that's the power of being part of a larger network. There's also ongoing innovations. This is an example of a cell-based wireless internet device. You can connect up to 10 devices to this particular hotspot. And as long as you can get a cell signal, you can take that mobile device anywhere in the world. So once you buy a subscription, it's completely portable anywhere in the globe where you can find a cell signal. So we're looking to this in our region as a potential solution to rural Wi-Fi in areas where there's cell signals, but perhaps not point-to-point wireless providers and those kinds of things. So again, there's other options, other programs that are coming on board all the time. How you win is the fact that as a marketing associate, if the county chose to become one, you receive a 35% commission in the first year. That drops to 15% in year 3, but that continues in perpetuity forever as long as the customer stays with the company. So as long as they're a client of Ridge Utilities, and if they came through your landing page and through your referral, you make recurring passive income forever. And just as a quick math example, on the bottom there are roughly 3,200 dwellings or sites within the county. And assuming you had 15% penetration, of that market, you'd get about 480 sites. Our margins, so what we clear on an electricity and natural gas combined account at the end of a month, is about $4.66. And so what that equates to is roughly $26,000 a year in revenue back to the county. Now, is that going to buy you a brand new shiny piece of equipment? No, I know that's not an earth-shattering number. But perhaps, as an example, the county's bursary program, this would be a way to fund that and perhaps expand that if you dedicated the revenues to that, as an example, right? So again, I recognize this is a paltry sum in comparison to the big picture, but it is incremental. And I think talking to you as a municipal elected official, we're all looking for new sources of revenue and for creative ways to diversify our incomes, knowing what's coming from the province. The other thing that I'd point out is that I only looked at the residential structures in the county. So there's an opportunity for commercial and agricultural that's not considered in that number. There's also an opportunity to expand beyond your direct borders as a part of that program. So in my mind, that's a bit of a minimum number or a minimum potential. The other thing that I'd point out is Greenbrier Capital. So we have partnered with Greenbrier Capital, which is listed on the TSX. This is the copy of the press release that we issued on January the 25th. And Greenbrier has made up to $120 million available to support microgeneration. And they've committed that if they're able to dispense all of that, that they would commit a further, up to a further $500 million. So all that means is that they're going to be leveraging our access to that solar club and working with us to support the development of new microgeneration sites across the region. And so what came to mind for me as a potential opportunity is I know the county did a pile of work already studying electrification of the Stewart Siding Industrial Park as an example. And one of the barriers, I assume, for that project not moving forward is perhaps the capital costs associated with that. Well, we can address that somewhat with Greenbrier. They're happy to foot the costs. And our solar club rates help maximize the ROI for everybody that's involved. And it could also mean new opportunities for microgeneration on other county facilities like you've had on this building as well. So again, just something for you to be aware of. And so really we have these 5 asks for you as an organization. First of all, the basic ask is to help us create awareness and buy local. As I said, we're the only energy provider south of Calgary, so we do want to encourage more money to stay in our local economy. I do think that the solar club could be a potential benefit to you specifically for this building. And like I said, to the Village of Sterling, it was an incremental $40,000+ a year. And we have shared our modeling with your administration team, so they can see those numbers for themselves and decide whether they buy into that calculation and can complete their own math. We could potentially be a vendor for other select county sites. Again, the lower administration fees for most of our low-use sites, the savings were sufficient to offset the rate difference. Certainly, our retail rates are not quite as effective as AMSC because of the bulk buy that they do, but net, most of our sites, we ended up saving money. And again, we've shared those calculations with your administration. The Marketing Associate Program, I think, could be a potential revenue opportunity for you. And again, perhaps it's something you dedicate to things like the bursary program. And then lastly, if the continued development of solar in your community across businesses and community residences is something that's of interest, then we do have access to this $120 million fund, as well as the expertise of an engineering, procurement, and construction company through Greenbrier to help with those kinds of projects. And of course, we link that to our beneficial rates. So those are just the 5 things for you to think about. And with that, I will stop talking and be happy to answer any of your questions.
So a couple that come to my mind, Trevor. Thanks for the presentation. Very informative, actually. So Ridge Utilities, would you kind of compare it to a company like Direct Energy that supplies energy and natural gas, but sort of along the same lines, except more of a localized?
Yeah, exactly. So in Alberta's market, of course, you have the people that own the infrastructure. So ATCO, for example, is your delivery service provider for the actual natural gas pipeline. Most of the county is served by Fortis, of course, on the electrical side, but you still have to buy the energy commodity from a retailer. So a Direct Energy would be an example of one. They're headquartered in Houston, Texas, but we would be one of, a local alternative to a Direct Energy as an example.
So the utility, I mean, the what do they call it, the riders and everything still come separate from a...
That's right. So
Okay.
yeah, the fun part of your power bill every month, when
Yes.
you get that bottom half of the page that's bigger than the top half.
Considerably, yes.
Yeah, we only are playing in that energy
Okay.
commodity space and the actual energy itself. Everything else is regulated by the province and is a function of who your service provider is. It's good.
And then the other thing that kind of interests me is your technology for cellular phone system that works as your internet provider. Is it similar to the TELUS Hub system, except...
Yeah, I believe it is a very comparable technology.
Okay.
The difference is that this provider, 2 things. First of all, the orange puck, the actual internet wireless device, it grabs whatever cell signal is around it. So it makes no preference to what network it uses. And likewise, if you travel anywhere in the world, it'll latch onto the closest and strongest cell signal. TELUS hubs and some of those technologies are obviously designed to have preferential access to certain networks if it's aligned with the provider. Ours doesn't discriminate. So yeah, there's a bit of a difference there, but it's a very similar technology.
Okay. Morris?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I heard you loud and clear. That sounds good to me. Those type of energy creators. Is that about the right wording? But anyways, you were saying, so much a kilowatt for whatever time of the day or whatever, Who pays for the line charges? Do they pay some towards the line charges or not? Or is that strictly up to the customer?
Yeah, so the line charges flow through directly to the customer. So
Yeah,
again, when you get
but
to
is that
monthly
right
bill
though? Okay, let's have a discussion.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to talk about the fairness of our deregulated market and how it's been structured, but and I can send you, actually, there's some work being done by UtilityNet to lobby the provincial government on changes to that structure, because it disproportionately affects rural communities and smaller users. We're essentially subsidizing bigger users on the system. So that I could talk for hours on that a separate day.
Yeah, I just want to put thoughts on it. Okay, thank you.
Hawes?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Trevor, are you only looking into solar power energy and everything, or are you also open eventually to wind and other energy sources than just the solar one?
Yeah, at this point, the only renewable energy that qualifies is solar. And part of the challenge with wind is normally the wind generation is much larger than sort of what would be considered small generation. So under the microgeneration regulation, the solar array, to be considered small, has to be a design of 150 kilowatt peak, which is fancy way of saying it has to be under a certain size. So for example, the system on this building is under 100. 150 is the cap. The challenge with wind is most of the towers are megawatts at a time. And so even smaller microgeneration in many communities is still not allowed. So you can't have roof-mounted turbines in the city of Lethbridge as an example. So the market is not quite as easy for us to navigate. But I do see that down in the future. Perhaps there's an opportunity for geothermal, hydrogen. There's all kinds of other fun technologies that are coming.
Any other questions? Steve, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On top of the commissions that are earned by the municipality, the customers that signed up, did you say there's also savings that they gain as well?
With our fee structure, we deliberately set our administration fees to be in the kind of the bottom tier of fee structures. So if you look at most companies, when I switched over, I ended up saving $5 a month right off the get-go off of administration. And then when I started to look at my actual rate per kilowatt hour and per gigajoule, our rates were provided savings on that as well. So when we put our fee structure on, we can add to our margins, but we've deliberately kept our margins slightly lower so that we can pass on savings to the consumer, and then it also benefits the community. They're getting lower rates, but then their money's coming back and it's staying within Southern Alberta so that we can invest in Southern Alberta as well.
And yeah, just if I can build on that, last month the market went a little bit crazy. So there's some examples of people that have reached out to us that were on a variable rate, so they were riding the market. So one young lady in our community, her power bill for last month was over $700. And it's because that normal charge of 6 or 7 cents per kilowatt hour went to more than $2. So just by moving to a fixed rate contract, you do protect yourself against that volatility. Now, this past February was a bit of a strange outlier. I have never seen anything quite like that before. But clearly to go from around $150 in a month to $700 was a bit of a sticker shock. So a fixed rate contract will solve that.
So the volatility, is that because of the cold weather kind of in the province?
Yes and no. So they're attributing it to the cold weather in the province, but there's a lot of things that are going on behind the scenes for that could be conceptualized as tools that the energy companies can use to leverage the price higher. So there's some conversations that are going on between UtilityNet and some of the other companies with the province right now and the Alberta energy regulators because of what's happened here. And this is indicative of what's happened in Texas as well. So the same thing happened down there.
Because in our market-based system, if I'm a generator and I have a coal or natural gas fired generation system, let's say it churns out 800 megawatts, all of a sudden the price is going up, it's actually in my best interest to cut back production and which drives the price higher, which induces me to further pull back. So I think we saw some market manipulation on the part of generators last month. That accounted for some of it. But it was, oh, it's cold weather. Well, no, actually, if you follow the historical production, you can see how they manipulate their production to capitalize on the power production.
They're allowed to do what's called energy withholding. So they're allowed to hold back. They're not allowed to come together as a group and deliberately price fix, but each individual one can manipulate the market on their own under a concept of energy withholding. And that's what happened, and there was about $1 billion profit made in 1 month. So.
Claus?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I think you were talking about the prices that the one lady had that went up to $700. We had it on the farm too. It was the same last month. We thought, did we forget to pay January? Because it was more than double than it was before.
Yeah.
And now my question is, like you got the REAs and stuff like that in the foothills, the Clare-Solomon area and stuff like that. Do they have the fluctuations the same as that we do then or not? Or do you not know that?
Yeah, it depends. So most of the REAs buy through a wholesale arrangement. So this program is primarily focused on small residential commercial. For larger industrials, this doesn't actually make any sense. And so wearing my other hat, in Lethbridge, we run an energy management program for our larger customers where we can aggregate and buy on the wholesale market on their behalf. So we use a company in Calgary called Energy Associates International to do that. So most of the REAs and gas co-ops, if they're smart, are doing the same thing. They aggregate their collective use and they go to the wholesale market, which is a little bit different than the regulated retail market.
Any other questions? Yeah, that's good. So
Thanks very
we'll,
much for the opportunity. We
we'll have
appreciate
a
it.
discussion on it and get back to you for sure.
Perfect. Thank you.
Oh,
Just-
yes, Gam?
Yeah, just likely that what will happen is staff will do like a risk assessment, and then we'll bring it back to council in a month or two.
Yep, you know where we are.
Good, thank you.
Thanks,
Have a
everyone.
good day. Yep.
My laptop, sorry, was a fast late. Just fast again. It was beautiful last night, was beautiful on Sunday, just fast again.
It's allergic to this building.
I can't get my computer, my presentation done.
But you only have it when you're here?
Yeah, every freaking time.
And not at home?
Pardon me?
Not at home? That's weird.
Well, here's my
So can we have a motion to receive for information? Bob? All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Just a council meeting, so that I don't have to worry about getting fogged up.
So you can actually see something.
So they don't fog up?
No, the contacts are good.
Well, you always have your window wipers, right?
Yeah. It does feel weird though not to have glasses.
Right.
Okay, let's move on to subdivision applications. And the first one is for 2021-0-013 Lethbridge County, and this is in the hamlet of Monarch.
Yes, thank you,
Whenever
Mr.
you're
Chairman.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Oh,
Oh,
I guess not.
can we go without them? Sure.
I don't know, I guess. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this first application is to subdivide the existing .9 acre title that the county owns in the hamlet of Monarch, and it's the former water tower site. And it's to create 5 equal lots, being about 51 by 150 feet each in size, and it would be for hamlet residential use. This proposed subdivision does meet the hamlet subdivision criteria of the land use bylaw. And I will let Steve just go through the planning comments as he sees fit.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, as mentioned, this application is to create 5 Hamlet residential lots. They're at a fairly decent size, though the land use bylaws minimum lot size is 50 by 100 feet, and these are approximately 51 by 150 feet, so the depth is a little bit more on them. They all will front to the west onto Edward Street, and then on the rear side, they'll back onto the park space, the community association with the hall and the playground space there on the back side. So with this application, these are possible with the Hamlet having municipal water and sewer system infrastructure in place. The county will be responsible for installing the water and sewer stub-ins for the lots. During the circulation of this application, there was no objections or concerns received. None of the utility companies require any easements. However, the county may decide to register their own easement for joint share of utilities. So there's one utility easement in place to service all the lots, and that would be in the county's name. The land, as council may recall, back in February was rezoned from Hamlet Public Institutional to the appropriate Hamlet Residential Land Use District, which now enables the subdivision, which is bound by the land use zoning, to proceed. So with that, as council has put the zoning in place, and you have, in a sense, reviewed this before, setting it up for the subdivision, and it does meet the criteria of the land use bylaw for Hamlet residential use, I have recommended approval to you. The county will be responsible for the cost of subdivision surveying and providing the service stub-ins to the lots, which the estimate was be approximately $10,000 per lot, and the county will recoup the costs with the eventual sale of the individual land titles, which could be $50,000 to $60,000 per lot, based on what's been happening in the Hamlet. But with that, I have recommended approval to you, as this is county-owned land, and it's your county's own subdivision application. It can be approved just with 2 basic conditions. One is that the final plan of survey is done to match your approval, to be registered land titles, and that any easements, if required by Lethbridge County, shall be registered in conjunction with that. As it's your own land and your own application, you don't have to worry about the typical taxes being paid up to date and those sorts of things, so.
You think they might not pay?
Right, so, it could be problematic, but.
I know the lot size to me is a little puzzling. It's 51 by 150. That seems awfully small. Like, is that right or wrong?
No,
They're
that's
50
actually-
feet wide and 150 feet deep?
Yeah.
That's actually quite typical in our hamlets. 50 feet is the minimum. I know it seems quite small when you're thinking from an agricultural perspective, but from an urban lot standard, that's quite common. And actually, it's quite deep. Usually they're only 100 feet deep, whereas these are 150 feet deep, so.
So you would have to kind of build a house, if you could only, how many feet can you be from your neighbor's property and
The
that kind of
setbacks in
stuff?
a hamlet are 5 feet from the property line. So you get 40 feet of developable width on a lot.
But you could have it longer than.
That's correct.
Oh,
Yep.
okay.
We've seen lots of those developments happening recently, so.
Okay, Morris?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I was looking at lot sizes too, and I'm thinking, I think we should, maybe, we've got a proposed 5 lots over there now. Is it possible if we reduced it to 4? Because I think for a hamlet, it would be more attractive if we had a wider and a bigger lot. You know, in the cities, I can see they're doing that, you know, because they gotta utilize, you know, all the utilities and everything to make it attractable for the city or whatever, but I mean, for us as in the Hamlet, I think we should have a bigger lot than that. Is that possible? Is that something we could be looking at? I think it would be a better selling feature. That's the way I look at it for a Hamlet, that is.
Yeah, Mr. Chair. These are a little bit deeper at 150 feet. Often in a lot of the other blocks, they're only 115 feet. So at 150, they're 35 feet deeper than what we usually see on some of the blocks. It's also quite typical in Shaughnessy as well. A lot of those are 50 by 115 feet. There are some that are a bit bigger, but that's fairly standard. So, and the Diamond City ones as well. So, based just on the historic plan that was registered and the blocks that were created. So in this case, that existing parcel, it was just taken and divided into 5 equals. That's why you get the 51 feet, because it's just of the width of the parcel. But
So, if I may, Mr. Chairman, so many of our lots in the hamlet already are 50 feet. Just if you look at on the map here, Mr. Chairman and council, so all of these lots here, they're all 50 feet wide. So, and you can see there's a house, it's probably a bungalow. This one is also 50 feet wide. That's a brand new house that was built last year, or sorry, 2 years ago. And all the lots you've approved in Diamond City have been 50 feet wide. So it's a common standard that we've been using. But it is out to council's discretion to decide whether you would want to make them wider or not. We did do a cost analysis when we were looking at where would be the breaking point in terms of servicing. 5 lots would be the best value for the county moving forward, obviously. 4 lots, you're putting in less servicing, but you're getting less housing in that area too. So, but that's a good discussion for council to have.
Bob?
Could someone come in and buy 2 lots and build 1 house on it?
If they wanted to.
Yeah?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Ann?
How wide would the lots be, Hillary, if there were 4? I'm sure you've already figured that out, right? Like, what would be the frontage? Oh, good work.
Thanks, Claude.
Thank you. But there's nothing precluding us from making 4.
Oh, no, it's up to council to decide. We just, from an administrative perspective, thought that 5 lots would be the most efficient use of the land.
Go ahead, Claus, and then Ken.
Yeah, I would prefer to see some bigger lots. I think that the sales would probably go a lot better, and if we do ask, is there an asking price already that we have set?
No, we have to, once we have the servicing in, we'll bring it back for council to determine the selling price.
So what would the servicing cost per lot?
$10,000 per lot,
$10,000 per lot.
yeah.
Okay. I would prefer to, to go to the wider lots. I think the length is no problem. That could probably go shorter, but that's not possible because of the way that things are situated.
Yeah.
But I think we should probably go to 4. And I would prefer 3, but, yeah.
Ken?
Yeah. They got an alley going behind that?
No,
Okay. so-
there will not be an alley.
So then they gotta get the garbage from the front?
And their garage and...
Yeah, everything has to be from the front of the property.
Well, to me, with no alley, I would prefer to go to 4, but
Well, yeah. because-
Or less. makes you pretty tight if you're...
Then if somebody wants to buy 2 lots, you know,
Well, yeah. Steve?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My concern was the no alley. There's an open area to the east, and I think it'll just be automatic that people will be accessing their backyards for whatever reason to park a trailer and not driving on their own property. I would kind of prefer to see an alley there, just for that reason. Otherwise, it just creates a nuisance for the community association, I think.
Ann?
So if you cut off part of the back lots, then you could obviously put an alley in there.
You have to have at least 10 meters for an alleyway, so you're cutting off 33 feet.
Okay, but they're 50 feet longer than traditional, right?
And we would have to build the road in the alleyway, so that would be an additional cost to the county to do that.
Morris?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Steve just brought up a good point down there. They do have a community association there. I think it would be, or would be nice, I think, if we got in contact with them and see what would be preferable to them.
They had no
Lot
comment.
sizes.
They had no comment on it.
They've been contacted?
No. Yes, they
Oh,
were contacted.
well, thank you very much. Yeah.
So these lots are to the west of the community association, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
So anyways, if I may, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah?
Well, if I may, then I turn this in. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I would make a motion that we, instead of 5 lots, we go with 4 lots, because I think it's going to be a lot more attractive for people to buy, and they'll pay the extra money, what's going to be needed down there. That's my motion.
Ann?
Did you want to add anything to your motion about the alley situation, or do you just want to leave it the way it is?
I can't, if it is all, if that's possible, yes, that's a good thing to look at, I think, but, yeah.
Claus?
I think the alley situation is probably a little bit more resolved with making them wider, that people can go by their own house and come to the front to bring their garbage and everything like that, so I don't know if that would be necessary.
Tori?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have no expertise in real estate, residential lot sizes. I give administration, this is their forte. I'm in no position to comment if a bigger lot sells more than a smaller lot, or what the price point is, alley access. Having said all that, I don't feel comfortable, I wouldn't feel comfortable voting on a amended lot size today without further information. I think this has been before council before. We've had the opportunity to make these comments before, so it's a little frustrating for me to be here today and we're debating lot size. Before I wouldn't feel comfortable voting on a 4 lot over a 5 lot or a 3 lot or any derivative of that without further information.
So, Tori, are you wanting to make a tabling motion pending further information on different lot sizes and costs to do that versus an alley or?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, but I don't know how that would go. I think there is a motion on the floor, so.
There is.
I made a motion there, Mr. Chairman, and I'm certainly willing to withdraw my motion and go ahead with what Tori is suggesting there.
Withdrawn, okay. So your motion is technically off the books then? Okay. So, does somebody want to table this for pending further information, or do you want just to bring back more information? Ann?
I just think because of the discussion at the table here, it's pretty clear there's differing opinions on lot size and alleyway. So I think it would be beneficial to bring back information on what the cost would be to put a alley in and how much money, like as Hillary has explained, the 5 lots is more conducive to recovering our costs for services. So I think we should table this and come back with more information on implementing an alley how much that would cost, how much the yearly maintenance would be, and as well, the difference between the 5 and the 4 lots.
Okay, so who wants to make that motion? Oh, okay, he will. Those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. We'll probably have that back to you for the first meeting in, we'll see if we get it for the first meeting in April or May. It's- We'll have some good discussion, and we'll get you some information so that you can make a
Okay.
good decision on this.
Okay, the next one we have on is subdivision application 2021-0-009, Deboer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This next subdivision is for a acreage subdivision. This parcel is less than the 20 acres in size and is eligible for a single split of the parcel without having to be redesignated to group country residential. It's located just north of the hamlet of Monarch. And so what they're asking for is that it be split into 2 titles, one being 5.95 acres and the other being 3.02 acres, both for country residential use. There are 2 existing residences on this acreage, which is why they're requesting this split. So Steve will go through the planning comments and the recommendation.
And Mr. Chair, this application is a re-split subdivision of an existing title, former farmyard with 2 residences, and create separate titles for each. The north proposed lot will be 5.95 acres, contains a dwelling, garage, and a horse paddock area with some extensive landscaping on site, while the proposed south yard would be 3.02 acres in size and contains a second farm residence along with a Quonset and a tree shelter belt. The proposed property line split is going to occur approximately 7.7 meters south of the garage, which is important because that then ensures that it's in compliance with the land use bylaw, which has a stipulated 6.1 meter minimum setback requirement. So each of the lots currently has their own approach and access off to the east, municipal road allowances. So that's already currently in place. Water is provided to both residents currently by the LNID to a private dugout, and the water is self-treated. The Lethbridge North County potable water co-op line is located and runs through the parent quarter section, so that may be utilized in the future as circumstances may permit. Sewage is treated by 2 individual on-site septic fields, which are already within the confines of the parent parcel, so that's not an issue. And they're not located in the area where we're re-splitting, so they'll each remain within their own title in the end. Both yards and dwellings are separate and have their own private utilities, gas, electrical power, such in place, so there's no issues with that. As well, in reviewing the proposal, there's no abandoned gas wells located in proximity or no CFOs in the area where any MDS is compromised. So as the subdivision is for a resplit of a small title less than 20 acres in size, it meets the subdivision criteria of the land use bylaw. The subdivision also complies with the standards, and the parcel sizes both will exceed the minimum 2 acres that's required. They have site servicing in place as described. During the circulation of the application, there was no concerns expressed, and none of the utility companies require easement for any of the existing servicing lines in place. So with that, I have recommended an approval to you. It'd be the same as in the draft resolution that came up, the 3 conditions: that the property taxes are paid up to date, development agreement entered into with the county if required, and that the final plan of survey be submitted based on the approval.
Clause.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Because there's more dwellings on that place, is it all owned by the Deboer?
Yep.
Yeah, the 2 brothers each has one of the residents. Yeah.
But it's all going to be on under this John Deboer then?
Well, currently, the title, I believe, is split between Robert Deboer and John Deboer. So in the end, I'm assuming whoever lives in which house is going to have, they'll probably separate the titles in their own names.
Morris?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So it's one title now, and they're trying to split that in two, right?
Yeah,
So it has been subdivided once already from that quarter section.
yeah.
Which, to me, it's fine what they're trying to do down there. My curiosity is, what is the assessment going to be down there from now to two parcels? Is that's probably going to be a higher assessment altogether, or could you have an answer?
Mr. Chairman, through to Councillor Zeenstra, I don't believe the assessment would change. They pay on what's already on the property, so their assessment would just be split into two, because they're already paying for two houses on their assessment.
They're only paying that already?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't substantially change the assessment value, because there's not any more improvements. If they were to build a new house or a new shop, then the assessment would change.
Steve?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, further to that, an adjustment will just happen between the two parcels, because now the assessment's based on their current land area, and then the improvements on there with the house and the Quonset garage. So afterwards, an adjustment will be made, because one parcel will be larger at 5.95 acres, the other 3.2. So an assessment will be split out based on that land acre and the value of the house on the one, as opposed to the value of the house on the other, and who has the Quonset, who has the garage or something. So the overall taxes to the county won't change much, but just between the two of them, it'll be a bit different. But
Dory? Or Steve?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The dugout that services the yard, is that the dugout to the north that's outside the property?
yeah.
Yeah.
And that's okay to be,
They have an
Oh.
easement, yeah.
Yeah.
okay. Okay, so if ever that land
Yeah,
were
they're-
to sell, there's the easement that would
I do
cover it?
believe on their last
Yes.
subdivision,
Yeah.
Councillor Campbell, that they had to have an easement put on the title. Yeah, so that would just carry forward with the two lots.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? We could use somebody to move one way or another. Go ahead, Claus.
I'll move that subdivision application 210-009 be approved subject to the conditions and outlined in the draft resolution.
Any further discussion? Call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Subdivision application number 2021-0-017, Neher, Hohlebein or
Hohlebein?
whatever, okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this next application is kind of the reconfiguration of titles or adjusting of titles in this particular area. They would like to reconfigure the property boundaries and the title acreage sizes of the four parcels through subdivision and consolidation by adjusting the titles, which are 36.82, 8.95, 20.06, and 58.51 acres in size, to create new titles that would be adjusted to 37.16, 12.6, 30.62, and 44.04 in size. And to make that hopefully a lot clearer for council, you can refer to the maps that are in your agenda package on page 6 and 7. Page 6 shows you what they exist today, as you see on the screen. And then on page 7 of your agenda package, it shows that reconfiguration. And with that, I will let Steve go through the planning comments, and he'll probably explain a little bit more of why they want to have this reconfiguration.
Mr. Chair, so this application is not to create any new or additional titles from what's there currently. It's just to make some adjustments between four titles that are already there. and basically, the three east titles, the ones that touch the river, their west property boundary is going to be realigned. So the main element, I guess, is that the three existing smaller parcels situated immediately west of the river have their west property lines adjusted to use the existing access road to be their property line boundary. All the parcels, existing parcels, take legal access from the private access road, which is provided through a long-standing easements agreement, and this will not change with the subdivision and consolidation process proposed. The larger 58.51 west parcel, which is quite a bit of coulee land, pasture and coulee land, has the main portion of the existing private driveway that goes into the river bottom and which provides the access to the neighboring parcels. So this area down here, a lot of these parcels weren't originally created by Lethbridge County through the subdivision process. A lot of these are long established parcels created on original township plans and then some mining plans. So a lot of them were established back in the early 1900s. So we're adjusting some of those current titles there. An additional purpose as well is to enable the larger west title of Lot 8, Block 1, Plan 1712357, and the southeast title yard of Lot 1, Block 1. So down in this corner here, right there where Hillary's kind of showing you on the map, there's that kind of jut out in the corner, is to perform a land swap between the two titles. As currently in this area, there are some sheds, shrubs, and some fencing, some small corrals, movable animal shelters that are split between the titles owned by the same landowner, and he would like them all located together on the one parcel on the east adjusted yard title, so that they're not between the two different properties. I believe that he may either has a sale pending or he's looking to sell one of the properties. So he's trying to clean it up and get everything onto the one title so there's no encroachments. So that's split between the two properties. So as you can see in the picture there, the current titles are kind of squared, and this is just pushing everything over out to the access road. So, and they'll just change some of the acreage between them. So there are some existing dwellings down there that are served by the Lethbridge North Potable Water Co-op. They have septic tanks, fields in place already. None of this will be changed or affected by the subdivision.
Morris's iPad died again. So I've had a person comment onto me on this. There is no legal access to the land titles.
There's legal, but not
It's not
physical
assigned-
county.
But it's not assigned to each title.
Yeah, it is.
Well, somehow there's some big confusion on this because according to their lawyer, there isn't. It's not registered to title,
But
no, any access.
So, sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Yes?
I know that there is all of these titles that currently have residences, these 4 titles down here, all have an access easement on their title to allow access to their parcels. There is this title that's along the river valley, maybe that's the one that people have been commenting on. I don't believe it has that same access easement, but there's no residence on this particular parcel.
So then we're making it a landlocked title.
It is an existing landlocked title, historically.
It is already.
Yes. It's not going to be, it already is. It's never had an access easement. So in discussions with any landowners or prospective buyers down in this area, we have recommended that they work with the adjacent landowners to get that access easement onto their title. But this title exists today the same as it did 100 years ago. It doesn't have like that legal agreement on their title.
So where is the legal access, or the access agreement? Where did they get access? Because I can't see it on this map, to be honest.
Yeah, no, that's fine, Mr. Chairman. It comes off of Township Road 101, which is at the top, so the Cheese Factory Road.
Yes?
There's an access that loops down, and then these properties all gain access from the main Township Road. And so all this title down here, that's all through an access easement.
So, but according to this map, that looks like these others are, so they get it through,
Yep, through that road.
okay.
So that's why typically we don't, just because this is a historic instance, we wouldn't want this today because it's not it can lead to some difficult scenarios.
So then that road comes, just, that's the road to come.
Get rid of that thing in the corner, the little white box.
So that's how they get access, is off that road?
That's correct. That's where
all
the
the
easement
titles.
is off of, yeah.
So is that the boundary of, between lot 8 and 9,
Yes.
that road?
That's what they want to amend so that this road acts as the subdivision boundary.
Basically, these are getting
Okay.
pushed over to the curve.
Yeah.
Yeah, so basically, I don't know if you look at these photos here, so that square there, which is the property boundaries, so the other lots to the south aren't part of this subdivision application in front of you. Those 3 lots there on the river, where they're square there, their west boundary's getting pushed over to touch the road, so they'd have a curve on the end. Now, the parcels that are part of this application in front of you, which I have the copies of the certificates title to here, they have registered on title access right-of-way agreement with the parent parcel of the road they're touching. It's registered on their title of the ones that are being in front of you for the readjustment. They have the legal access agreement registered on title. So that won't change with the subdivision, and that automatically gets carried through by land titles onto this new reconfiguration, so that doesn't change.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yep,
No.
it just, it was very confusing.
That-
These Mr. Chairman, these access easements are very confusing and they do lead to problems between landowners in the future, but that's why when we're trying to work with these landowners, we try to make sure these historical ones are taken care of.
So then the bigger parcel that has no access now will still have no access. Is it owned by the same people, or is it
No, it's
different
owned by,
owner?
I do believe it's owned by a separate entity, Mr. Chairman. yeah.
Okay.
And they're well aware of what they need to do to work
Okay.
with those landowners.
Go ahead, Ken.
There's no school bus that goes down there. It stops at the top.
I would imagine it would stop at the top.
Yeah, so there's, and it's a mess down there.
It's a bit of a bumpy road.
Morris?
Yeah, I know about where it is, but not 100% sure. Is Dale Russell, does he have property close to that too?
Somewhat to the north, Councillor
It's
Zinstra.
further to the
North.
north, eh?
This is
Okay.
directly east
Yeah,
of Diamond
okay,
City.
yeah.
Kind of the Cheese Factory Road, that's kind of the offshoot that you would go down.
Yeah, I know where it is. Did he give it an attempt once before to subdivide that, or?
Councillor Zinstra through the chair, they have done some lot adjustments actually in this area more recently. I do believe what was it, in 2017, Steve, that they did, or 2016?
Yeah, there's,
In 2016, Mr. Neher had done a subdivision down here before to create his 2 titles.
Those
So
two in the corner.
that's where you may have seen this name before.
Any other, Steve?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll move subdivision application 2021-0-017 be approved subject to the conditions as outlined in the draft resolution.
changed. Mr. Chair?
Yes?
Just subject to that, I was just going to mention that since the package came out to you, We did get comments back from the Alberta Historic Resource Director, which we just got yesterday. So I had a condition on here about, normally they would have to do, obtain a historical resource clearance because they're in a provincially identified area of HRV 5 and 4 in the listing of historic resources down the river bottom there. The Historic Resource Director said they don't have to do it at the subdivision stage, only at a future development stage if they're changing the land or putting anything on the land. So so I suggest that condition 5 that I had in your draft approval could be removed because it's not required at this time.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in favor? Those opposed? It is carried. Subdivision application 2021-0-14 Postman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is the last subdivision for today, and it is to subdivide out a 3-acre bare land, so vacant parcel, from a quarter section of 160 acres, and it's located in the northwest 2510-24 west of the 4th. And this parcel is located 2.5 miles northwest of the hamlet of Monarch and about 2.5 miles west of Highway 23. So just kind of in between Monarch and Nobleford area. As you can see, it's a dry land parcel, and they want to take out the, sorry, let me just get my map up here, the corner on the northwest corner of that particular quarter section. And I'll let Steve go through the planning comments and the recommendation.
And Mr. Chair, as described, this application is for a first parcel out of the quarter section. It's for a bare land vacant parcel, 3 acres in size, in the very northwest corner to allow for a future yard area. The quarter section is relatively flat, and the proposed site is not traditionally experiencing any flooding up in that corner. And the proposed parcel configuration is triangular in shape because the applicants are looking in the future to secure some irrigation rights and possibly put a pivot on there if possible. The applicants are proposing that water be provided through Lethbridge County Potable Water Co-op if possible, or alternatively they would default to a private hauled cistern system for the single lot. Sewage is proposed to be treated by an individual on-site septic treatment system, and as such, under the requirements for a vacant parcel, they'll have to provide a soils analysis to demonstrate the suitability for that. The parcel does have its physical and legal road access from the West Municipal Road Allowance. In reviewing this application, there are no abandoned gas wells in the quarter section or in the area we're subdividing. There's no confined feeding operations located in proximity where the MDS would be infringed upon, as well as there's no historical or environmental special considerations with this application. So during the circulation of this application, it was indicated there's no objections or concerns received. However, ACO Gas did ask or requested an easement for gas line utility. The proposal does meet your criteria as a first parcel subdivision out from the quarter section for a vacant bare land parcel. The proposed 3-acre parcel size conforms to the bylaw's minimum 2 to 3 acre maximum parcel size. And the site may be serviced as proposed. So with that, I have recommended approval to you on the 3-acre vacant parcel subdivision, as it does meet your site servicing and land use bylaw parcel criteria. On a approval, there would be the 6 conditions on there as is proposed in the draft, that the taxes are paid up to date, a development agreement is entered into with the county, The third, that the applicant has a professional soils analysis completed for the new 3-acre parcel to demonstrate the suitability of a private on-site septic system with results favorable to subdivision authority, that a final plan of survey is submitted, and that the ATCO gas easement is provided. As of today, we haven't quite heard back from all the utility companies yet. So the 6 is just the blanket easement on there for the other utility companies if something is required.
So Steve, when you say that taxes should be paid up to date, does that mean, are they selling it to somebody else, or is it because you're subdividing 3 acres from a large title? Or I'm not sure how to.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, they would have to have the taxes on the whole quarter section paid and up to date.
Oh, okay.
It's a requirement under the Municipal Government Act, and when we subdivide, and the province allows this as a way, I guess you'd say, for leverage for the municipality to collect on taxes that are in arrears or back taxes, is that, so this is a provincial requirement that, so that's why you see this on every single subdivision we bring in front of you, other than the county's own, obviously, but, so it's a requirement under the MGA that once the taxes are levied, that when we subdivide, they have to be paid or paid and up to date, so there's no outstanding tax arrears. So it also means that if once the taxes is levied by the county, if they haven't paid yet, they'd have to pay that prior to signing off. So, for instance, if you levy your taxes in May and they got their subdivision approval in May or June and they want to finalize in July, and they would normally have, the county here, is it your tax period of
End of July.
end of July. But if they're trying to finalize before that, they'd have to pay it early. They couldn't wait to like the due date of your taxes, whatever, in order to get their subdivision registered. So they always have to be paid, so there's no outstanding balance before we can endorse the subdivision to sell the land titles.
So at that point in time, you just make the best guess as to what the taxes might be? Because
No,
we
it's
wouldn't
what
know for
their-
sure.
It's based off of what their tax bill was for that particular year. So they paid their taxes, then they just get a receipt from the tax clerk saying that they've paid their taxes for that year. And then if it's kind of in that in-between stage, they would know what their tax amount was because they've received the tax bill from the county.
But if you were, like right now, if you were wanting to go ahead with this, we wouldn't have created that yet.
No. So
So
they
you'd
paid
be
their taxes.
best guess scenario, kind of.
So it'd be based on
Last
so if they paid last year's
Okay.
taxes and they're paid, then we say their taxes are paid and up to date because you haven't levied for this year's taxes yet.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
I got you now.
Okay.
Morris?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. To Steve and Hillary, I remember the day when we went from a minimum of 1 acre to 2 acres. And the reasons for that was because to accommodate your septic tank and field. But if you look at the shape of this, I think it's nothing alarming. It's just the way I look at it, or whatever. Certain conditions have been changed again in the last few years on what you're supposed to have for septic tank and field. It'd be not an issue on this type of acres.
No, because they have a minimum of 3 acres, Councilor
Yeah, they do
Zinstra,
have the
so-
minimum, but is it gonna be, they're gonna build a house there, I imagine. So is it gonna be tight or?
Through the chair to Councilor Zinstra, we haven't found any issues with these 2 or 3 acre titles, just because they typically a septic system doesn't take up that much area. Maybe they take up, depending on the type of soils, 50 feet, 100 feet of the piping system, like the field area, by say like a 20, 30 foot wide. So yeah, it takes up a fraction of the area. So we haven't had any issues with that since we've changed the bylaw. We found that we've been very good at there. We haven't had any septic issues, so. Yep.
Any other questions on this one? If not, go ahead, Steve.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Normally on the Bearland subdivisions, you mentioned that there's a family member planning to build or something like that. Is there such a plan here that you're aware of? Because if I'm not mistaken, I think the land's for sale, and if we're just creating a lot for the heck of it, I think at some point we need to protect farmland.
Steve might know more, just talking to the applicant.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I don't know for sure. It's in the family, and I know their father has passed away. I'm not sure how long ago, whatever, but, so it's the daughter and the son, the two of them. So I'm not sure if one's getting one parcel, the other is getting the other. I'm not sure what their private thing is. In Alberta, we are required to base subdivision decisions on the merit of the application and if it meets the land use criteria and not people's intent, whether they're planning to sell or not sell or build or not build, that, or what their personal circumstances are. So that part does get a little bit tough because then you're kind of sometimes speculating. So based on the criteria of whether the parcel is allowed or not, can be serviced, any adjacent impacts or that sort of thing, is what the subdivision authority is required to be basing their decision on. So you have to got to deal with somebody that they're selling it, that somebody else is looking there, or they're just doing it to settle their estate, that they each get a piece, one the ag, one the acreage. I don't know for sure, and legally, unless they offer me that, I'm not allowed to ask that because it's considered private, whatever. So sometimes people offer that information, but yeah, sometimes they volunteer and sometimes they don't. So.
Okay. Any other questions? We need to move her then, or not? Morris? Nobody has made one.
Okay, I'll move it. Let me have a look down here. I gotta go to the page again. I'll move that we, the subdivision application 2021-0-14. I'll move that.
Any discussion? Call the question. Those in favor? Those opposed? It's carried.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Do you have the other one too, Steve, so I could sign it? There's the one signed for the one other one. Does that need to be initialed or anything, or you did? Nobody else does? Okay.
I left that, the council reports up there, if you just want to pull that up. Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
You're welcome. Thanks, Morris.
Oh my God, if we just keep getting better, there'll be no stopping us.
There's always some areas for improvement.
Some guy was wanting to buy a piece of it, but his lawyer said to him, there's no legal access.
That's always been my thought. Are we having a break or? Should we call a 5-minute break?
5 minutes, 5 minutes.
Mr. Wicks.
G1, Municipal Services, and that's a 21 capital equipment pneumatic packer request. Go ahead.
All right, I apologize. I'm having some Morris computer technical difficulties. It just kicked me out completely. Can you?
You think you had trouble before?
It's becoming, oh, that's, I got it. Anyway, since I prepared it, I know it pretty well. So what I'm bringing forward to you today, Mr. Chairman and Council, is a proposal for a budget amendment to the capital purchase item brought forward for 2021, which involved the purchase of a used pneumatic tire packer that we have been researching and looking for costing essentially to resolve this equipment purchase. And the initial budget request was $75,000 for a used unit. And through our research and finding out what's actually available out on the market, this has become a considerable venture, essentially, to find this. The best scenarios that we could come up with was a used unit that was out of the Calgary area, and it came in at $137,000. So what I'm here to ask for today is basically a change in the funding portion for this capital purchase. The details that I included a bunch of the financial implications, because that's the big portion of this. With the initial purchase budget was $75,000. Like I said, the used one is $137,000. That's a cost difference of $62,000. The sale of the existing unit, which we have been having numerous issues with over the years. In total, it's had over 90 days of downtime due to parts issues. The equipment, all equipment that the county funds right now is through the reserve charged to the specific department for full cost recovery for future purchasing. The Amon unit has built already a reserve of $96,000 over the past 4 years. Hopefully, looking at the market for what this piece could go for on the used market, it could sell from anywhere from $50,000 to $80,000. So almost a full portion of the equipment reserve would be funded for this piece of equipment, even with the initial surface or the initial purchase, usage, and then the sale. So this would be almost a net negative or a net zero essentially transaction essentially on that piece of equipment. And then now we would have a newer piece or a newer used piece of equipment that would be building that exact same reserve back in. We have seen some good results from some of the equipment. Steel prices have not necessarily hit the equipment market as of yet, which is a good sign. Two of the graders that we put out this year came in at the original purchase budget was 1.2. The purchase cost ended up being $1,035,000 for a difference of $165,000, as well as the used scraper that we originally budgeted at $600,000. We were able to negotiate a price down to $534,000 on that, so a cost difference of $66,000. So we have seen some good overall results on those equipment purchases. Unfortunately, this Dynapack or the pneumatic tire packer that we're looking for the base stabilization crew has been more difficult. I did propose a couple alternatives as well. One of the options would be that we could purchase an even newer model. The only problem with those is, I mean, that resets the purchase completely, and we would start from basically zero and on. The cons to that is the purchase cost point on these is substantially higher at over $200,000 plus. We could delay the packer purchase again till 2022. This would allow us to continue doing market evaluations for a used market purchase, and would involve no changes to the essentially the capital equipment forecast that we had for this year. The con portion of that is the current equipment has had, like I said, numerous downtime hours, and rental would probably be required to supplement that accordingly. So my recommendation to council is in regards to this. This is a key piece of compaction equipment for our base stabilization crew. We utilize 2 units on an ongoing basis, and these units run daily. Because of that program and council putting additional funding into that for this year, moving that budget from 700,000 up to 1.2 million. This is a key component, is compaction on these jobs. The existing piece of equipment that we have, the used Amman one, is a lemon to an extent because of some of the cost points that we've evaluated through this and the downtime. And the funding is fully recovered essentially through our fleet program. So this, as I stated previously, this would be essentially almost a net zero exchange. But this would be an adjustment in the capital equipment budget that we was already previously approved.
Ross?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just before I was talking with the Reeve about this subject here too, I'm just wondering, why does this have to come to council if you're within your equipment budget and you can work within it and you're not going over your equipment budget? Then isn't it a management tool that you can kind of decide what you're going to be doing on your own instead of having to bring that back, because it's probably going to be approved anyway because you're within your budget?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Vanderveen. Anytime there is, I look at it and see what the cost point evaluation is. Since the cost purchase price that I advertised through the capital equipment budget was $75,000, and now I'm looking to adjust that to $137,000. With the $62,000 difference, that's almost doubling essentially what I had originally advertised to council. So, as you have to approve the 5-year capital plan, when we have that much of a cost difference, it's always prudent to bring that back to council.
So at what point, when you're dealing and wheeling, do you have to come back to council for these kind of equipment deals that you're making, if you stick within your budget?
Cost overruns. I mean, if there's substantially, I mean, similarly, if next year I have in my forecast that graders will be essentially $600,000. I don't know what the price of steel is going to do in the coming years. That price very well might be, I might be coming back to council asking for additional funding allocated to that capital purchase item based on that change. But I want to be able to validate that costing difference as well, because there's not, that way that there's no, it's all out on the table as far as the details.
Ann?
Yes, just to Councillor Vanderveen's question, though, too, we're very cautious of council's time, and we make sure that the only thing we bring forward is of necessity that you're aware of. But there is limits that we should bring it for. There's also a bit of a gray area as well, so we sometimes err on the side of caution.
Steve?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Isn't it within a policy as well that cost overruns of 10 or even 20% need to be approved by council, or?
Yes. And I'm sorry, but Jen isn't here, so I don't know that exact number.
Yeah.
She'll be here this afternoon.
But it's not like a 50%, it's like a 10 or 20% if I'm not.
It's 10%, I think.
Yeah. So that would be kind of the reason also.
Morris?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I can see what's happening down there because it's also happening, with a lot of other businesses and especially farming, like grain bins. They went up. It's over 30% up now from 4 or 5 months ago, and it's all because of the steel prices or whatever. However, there is a lot of construction going on too in the provinces because that was an initiative to keep people working during COVID or whatever, So my bottom line is, if you didn't get approval from council to go ahead with that piece of equipment, what you've been describing as needed to do the right job for the job we want to do. So if you didn't get that piece of equipment, then you can't do the right job, right? Or it won't be as effective. So how much is that going to cost? And that's the way I'm looking at it too.
So I would look at it, the situation as this. I think we did increase the budget to try and get to where we can actually produce a road that will actually stand up to what it needs to do. And without proper working equipment, we can hardly do that. But when I look at it, I kind of look at it from another side as well. If you want and need this piece of equipment, what could you give up that you really don't need to buy this year to get this?
I could definitely look at something, Mr. Chairman. We could cross off one of our truck purchases or something to that effect, which we've also, I think we have a truck. Lots of these purchases are already in the midst of being done, so the one thing is I would have to check to see which ones have actually been ordered. The vast majority go through me, but I do have a truck that is kind of in limbo right now because of the delivery time on it. So that is something, and that purchase, I believe, was estimated at $60,000 for the truck portion, so that is something that could become.
Well, the only reason I say that is because, looking forward, we know that this year we're gonna be okay for MSI dollars, but moving into the next years down the road, and what are we gonna do? Like, we can't keep increasing the taxes all the time to cover off everything, so just kind of maybe find efficiencies where we can. Any other comments? Tori?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just maybe echo some of the comments. Obviously, like you noted, Jeremy, we made a substantial commitment to these base stabilized roads, and this is obviously a key piece in that. So I understand where the request is coming from. I think that's very important that we have that, the tools in place to utilize those dollars and to, as the Reeve noted, to try and provide a quality driving surface. Just I guess a comment or a question that was made to me from a ratepayer, and I guess it's no different than what we do as farmers. You have all your options equipment-wise. In your world, Deere, Caterpillar, Dynapack, Amon, all these other brands. I guess just philosophically, as it was put to me, why could you maybe just provide your rationale as to, do you see a benefit from having a full line from a certain manufacturer as opposed to picking and choosing? And I guess just so I'm not putting you on the spot here, like my philosophy in my operation is the best equipment for the best job, and if that's red, green, blue, whatever it is, I could care less. But I do see the ratepayer's point of view from having those relationships, maybe part sources, those kind of things. Could you maybe just speak to that?
Sure, thank you for that question. In regards to equipment is always, it's a bit of a balancing relationship. So I'm gonna speak to graders because that's probably the easiest analogy. A cat grader and a John Deere grader, depending on what they are actually required to do, you specify the piece of equipment so they can do the job that you need to. If we're looking at something in the case of maintaining a roadway, they both perform the exact same duty. Maybe they're not necessarily the opinion of an individual. Might be that a cat grader is better than a John Deere grader, or a John Deere grader is better than a cat grader. But I look at it from a business perspective, and I say, well, what's the best cost efficiency that I'm going to gain through that piece of equipment, through the knowledge that I have, and as well as looking at prior information that we have as far as fuel consumption, downtime, maintenance requirements, the overall total cost of ownership of that piece of equipment. So for this year in particular, when we actually put out these pieces of equipment to bid, there was almost an $80,000 price discrepancy between a John Deere and a cat grader. They're performing the same details. I cannot validate saying it's worth $80,000 more to do the exact same job. So in every piece of equipment, you have to look at all the little dynamic pieces that do come into it. And in the case of this one in particular, we're looking at something that we've had a very much a difficulty with as far as its performance and as far as access to parts and stuff like that, because it is a European model. Lots of times I always look at, should we stay with more North American brand? Where is the parts supplier? Even to the extent of when it comes to part supplies, it's a question of who can actually provide the support pieces that we need on that aspect as well. In lots of cases, we're very much a global environment, but even within that global environment, access to parts is key in reducing your downtime. If a part has to come from Europe, essentially to service a piece of equipment you have, you're not doing your own due diligence and saying, where is my supply portion coming for that? Specifically in RFPs, one of the things I specify within my RFPs for equipment is access to parts, and them detailing where those access to parts is, so that we know, as part of our evaluation process, what is that time gap going to be essentially between when we can be back up and going again, because we are running a 365-day in operation potentially. Depends on the year, depends on the season and whatnot, but there is always that potential that we need to be up more than we need to be down. So on the cost point though, that's an evaluation point ongoing all the time. And yes, very much it's about having good pieces of equipment to do the job that you're trying to execute. Sometimes there is paying more is sometimes more valuable to the organization than paying less, but that's got to be part of that overall evaluation point, because inevitably lots of times when it comes down to some pieces is I can't validate this cost point, and that's why we do a purchasing evaluation matrix basically, so that we can detail off price is not the sole piece. We are looking at the parts portion, we're looking at the references on the previous pieces. If we don't have commonality with that, we're looking at the evaluations we've had from our own internal operations as well. Probably didn't touch off on every little aspect, but
Any other questions? Go ahead, Claude, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the explanation, Jeremy, because that was very helpful, and like the policies that the council, that the county has, and it's very good. So with that, I'd like to make the recommendation that council approves a budget increase for the pneumatic tire packer, and it be in place for the 21 base stabilization program.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, call a question. Those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you, Jeremy.
thank you very much, council.
Okay, let's move down to Community Services, G2.1, and that's bylaw 20-007. That's a road closure. Lucy-Howe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Earlier in last year, I should say mid last year, we brought forward this road closure application for County Council. We did have first reading of this particular bylaw on August the 6th, and the public hearing was held on October the 1st. And then as per provincial requirements, it was sent to the Minister of Transportation for them to sign. We have received the signed bylaw back from the minister, so they have approved the road closure from a provincial perspective. And so now we bring back this bylaw for second and third reading for County Council to decide whether they wish to finalize the road closure or conversely not. This application was made to close a portion of road in the Lucy-Howe Subdivision. And this portion of road the name of the road is Sidney Road, and it's to close an area that is 187 meters long by 10 meters wide. And if approved, the road closure area would be sold and then consolidated to the landowner to the north. So Mr. Darcy Siebert is the one who formally made this application. In previous discussions with the Minister of Transportation and County Council, it was determined that this portion of road would not be required for any county purposes. Backing onto this, the Lucy-Howe subdivision here is the Canamex corridor. And I'm going to see if I can, there you go. So those yellow lines indicate that the corridor will actually back on, at one point in time, will be built in this area. So that portion of road wouldn't be required for any future access to the larger road network. As mentioned, if approved, the applicant would be required to consolidate the road closure area into their adjacent parcel located north of the council council may consider is you may decide that this road closure area would be not proceed, so refusing second reading of the bylaw. This would keep the portion of road open for an undetermined use potentially by the county. The one setback to that would be is that the county would forego any sales revenue from this sale of this property and would have to manage and maintain the roadway for an ongoing into the future. Some financial impacts with regards to this particular type of road closure is that if approved, the proceeds of the sale would be $8,000 in the amount of $8,694. There would be a very, very minor increase to the taxes to the property by consolidating this road, so it's fairly inconsequential. But there would be obviously some savings to the county also for not having to maintain an undeveloped portion of roadway. So potentially mowing of the grass in the area and such things like that would be potentially what the county would incur if we had to maintain the road area. So with that very short report, I have recommended that bylaw 20-007 be read a second and a third time by County Council for the reasons that it does meet, that there were no concerns expressed with regards to the road closure area and that it has been approved by the Minister of Transportation.
Morris?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hillary, Steve is not here, is he? No, he's not. But, you know, you're very capable anyway, so we don't need Steve. But anyway, the question I got is the sale of the portion of land, that sale of that portion of land, it's based at $5,000, you said?
No, that's, so when we do a road closure, it's actually based on the assessed value of the adjacent lands.
Yeah,
So
that's what I
yeah.
mean, and it's irrigated land, and so when does that change on our books? Like right now, you know, so that type of a land, irrigated land down there, it's selling for 10,000, as high as
Right.
15,000 now, you know, so we're quite a bit below that. Who sets that? Is that the province who sets that, or is that the municipality?
Thank you, Councillor Zistra, through the chair. It is actually our assessor that determines the sale value of any road closure areas in the county. So this acreage, so the acreage for the area is 0.46 acres, so it's a little less than half an acre. So it was probably based on the value of, I'm not sure if it was based off of, in this case, it would have been based off of the value of the country residential parcel, like the value of the land. So probably around $17,000 an acre.
So Hillary, that is added to Block 9? Is that correct?
It would be added on to Mr. Siebert's property, which is.
That's Block 9, right? Or Lot 9, sorry?
Sorry. Trying to see what lot it is here. It's not my system. I don't know how to get the.
Oh.
But yes, let me just look at the map I have there. Yes, lot 9.
So going to the west from that, is that been closed too? Like you were just adding the part going
Yep.
from the county, that road going east, right? So what
Correct.
happens to the stuff on the other side going that way? Has it already been?
So when it comes to road closures, it's kind of up to the adjacent landowners to determine whether or not they want to purchase the land. On that parcel going west, it looks clearly that it's being used by that adjacent landowner. But they haven't requested that they consolidate it to their property.
Both of the next two people over are.
That's correct. But one thing that specifically with the Lucy-Howe area is that I do believe that we do have a larger road network in place for when there is future subdivision. Let me just scroll out just a little bit here. This is a very historic subdivision. I do believe it was
Yes.
created in the 1920s, somewhere around there.
That's CPR, yeah.
Yeah, one of those old settlements that they thought would be, you know, a booming a little town or something. I think with regards to this lower right-of-way down here, Mr. Chairman, is that I do believe that if these areas up here were to subdivide and possibly down here, is that we might actually want to retain that right-of-way and create an actual road that would tee into the range road.
Okay.
So that's part of that larger plan there, is to create that connectivity. So I think we would maintain that this portion stay as is, and then in the future, we would add to it to create a larger road network.
Because they're building houses pretty fast on the east side there.
They are,
Yeah.
it's actually taking off, which is quite good, so.
Yeah. Morris? Oh, you were just exercising your, okay. Right, okay. Any other questions? Well, give me second reading then.
I'll move to second reading. Mr. Chairman, bylaw 20-007. We had the second time.
Any further discussion? Call the question. Those in favor? Those opposed? Carried. And third reading.
I'll
Bob?
move the third reading on bylaw 20-007.
Any discussion? Seeing none, call for the question. Those in favor? Those opposed? Carried. Thanks, Hillary.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Let's move down to G 2.2, Policy 217, Community Peace Officer Policy, Communications System Policy.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning, Dick.
So I've got before council policy, communication system policy 217. The current communication system policy was passed by council on December 19th, 2019. And that policy was it was dictated by Solgen that we get a communication system policy because of what happened up in Rob Lessenby a number of years ago. There was no communication there. So the province dictated that we need peace officers need to communicate with someone when they're out in the field, and then council adopted that. And at the time we were with Lethbridge Public Safety Communication Center, and this started January 1st. We moved our contracting services from PSCC to Tabor Police Dispatch because there was a substantial amount of cost savings found. And then as a result of that, we needed to tailor that communication policy now to fit in with Tabor Dispatch. And the policy is pretty much the same as with Ridge Regional, MD of Tabor, and Colehurst were all with Tabor Dispatch. And the policy is, it's not verbatim, but it's very close to it. We just took their policy and copied it so that it's all the same. It all aligns to everyone's policy. And with that, the option one is to adopt the policy as presented, which it brings us back into compliance with the Solicitor General's office. And the policy has already been approved by the Solicitor General. And if we don't, we'd be in violation with the Solicitor General. Option two is to again amend the policy to councils, if council has any concerns, to revise it. However, that being said, the one we have in front of us has already been approved by council. There is no financial impact as a result of this, and the communication system policy is a requirement, as I mentioned, under the Peace Officer Program. The purpose of the policy is to ensure consistency and to ensure safety of the county CPO and to instill public confidence in the program. Administration is of the opinion that rescinding the current communication system policy and adopting the newly drafted policy will ensure clear direction to the county's CPO program. So the recommendation is to revise or to rescind the current communication system policy and adopt a new one.
Any questions? So David, when you talked about Colehurst, this is only for CPOs? This isn't like fire and everything else, it's just CPO?
Yeah, that just specifically pertains to myself.
So Colehurst CPOs,
They have the same policy, but it has
Okay.
absolutely nothing to do with us. I just brought them into the picture just
Oh,
to say
yeah.
that we all tailor off the same policy, that's all.
and the previous dispatcher, the system was Lethbridge?
With City of Lethbridge, yes.
And is the service you're getting from Tabor as good?
It's even better.
Klaus?
So what's the cost difference between being with the city and Tabor?
Approximately 21,000.
How much?
21,000.
Oh, wow.
Steve?
And we're actually getting more than what we got with the city, so.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So in the policies, so the timing and procedures of how they get back to you or get a hold of you when you're on a call,
Yes.
that hasn't changed or anything within, I guess, from Lethbridge or Tabor, or even from policy to policy?
I don't believe so. No, the initial, thanks for your question. Initial time is 5 minutes. And then whoever we're dealing with seems to be very cooperative or there's no concerns, then I can up that timer to a maximum of 30 minutes. But there's nothing preventing them from checking on me within that time frame.
And then I guess the minimum time that they're checking on you, that's probably from the province, those times? Is that how they kind of stipulate on how soon they need to get a hold of you, or?
The 5 minutes is pretty standard across the board with any police agency.
Okay, thank you.
So we need to rescind the old policy first? What's the number of it?
Do we need to rescind the old policy first?
Oh, thanks for the question. No, it's the same policy. We're retaining the number, so we're really just calling it a revision. So,
Oh, okay.
unlike a bylaw where you might rescind the entire bylaw, adopt a new one with a new number, this one is dealt with or presented to you, Mr. Chairman and Council, as a revised bylaw.
Okay. Yep, go ahead, Ken.
That revised Lethbridge County Peace Officer Communication System Policy 217 be adopted as presented.
You're moving that?
Yes.
Okay. Any further discussion? Go ahead, Morris.
A question, Mr. Chairman. Just, it has a really, yeah, it does have something to do with the policy. But anyways, when you need backup, you can get on the radio right away. And I think all the departments pretty well respond to that, isn't it, Dave? Like even the city of Lethbridge, if they hear that call, would they respond still?
Thanks for your question, Councilor Seenstra. So the way that procedure would work is I've got well, you can all see here, I've got an orange button on here.
Okay.
So if I'm in immediate danger, I press that button and then that kicks everybody else out. Even if someone else was talking at the time, that button overrides everybody else.
Okay.
And then anyone who's on the system at the time hears that call, and then dispatch, Tabor Police Dispatch, they would then dispatch the RCMP, and if it just so happens that there's another peace officer close by, depending on the situation, they would come as well. So, with a city, well, the majority of, or all of my work happens out in the county. So it would likely be the RCMP. Now, would the city police come if it's right outside the city? That I don't know. If they knew about it, I'm sure they would, but the way the process is laid out, it would be the RCMP because it's their jurisdiction. However, if, again, depending on the situation, Tabor Police could very likely let Lethbridge Police know as well.
Any further discussion? I will call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thanks, David.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move down to G 2.3, Community Planning Association of Alberta Annual Conference, it's virtual, and the request for sponsorship.
Getting my exercise today.
Yes?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to present this to you just because I know in the past, County Council has broadly supported the Community Planning Association of Alberta by both attending the conference in the past and then also being a sponsor. So this year, because of COVID, last year the conference had to be canceled. This year, they decided to host a virtual conference based off of some of the information that we had from last year's conference. So the title for this year, or the theme for this year's conference is Taking the Initiative, Exploring Innovations and Resiliency in Community Planning. As this is an online or a virtual conference, the cost for the conference is significantly less at $200 per person. And this would include an education session, which will be on the Monday. I have attached the information for you that outlines the various sponsorship levels that are available. They did reduce the sponsorships, the value of them, just because it'll be in a different format. And I've also attached the conference information for you to review. Previously, County Council had sponsored the CPAA conference at a gold level sponsor level. And for this year, that would mean $1,000. If County Council did not wish to sponsor at that level, there is the silver or bronze levels, which are $700 and $500 respectively. The topics that are being planned for this conference, I think there are some really interesting and relevant topics that are going to be discussed, you know, looking at balancing regulations and economic development, looking at supporting local annexation is always a topic that comes up, local innovations in stormwater management, building thriving small towns, looking at transit opportunities. That's probably more for the smaller town aspect, but there might be some nuggets of good information there for the county. And then there's also looking at recruitment and retention strategies, which I thought was interesting. So kind of looking at it very holistically in terms of the number of types of sessions that will be hosted this year. So with that, I would recommend that County Council discuss amongst yourselves if any member wants to attend, that they be allowed to attend. I'm still on the board for the CPAA, so I will be in attendance. This year I am up for, I've decided that I would like to be on the board for another term, so I will be running again to be on the CPA board. And obviously I would like to have county support if possible in that. Also with regards to sponsorship, I would recommend the gold level sponsorship, but recognizing that council has various other obligations and priorities, would understand if they wanted to take a reduced level this year, those funds would come from council's discretionary fund. So with that, are there any questions of council on the conference?
Morris and then Claus.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Chairman. Yeah, Hillary, you know, I always enjoyed that conference when it was, I think I almost attended every one of them, and it was always a good conference, you know. And when it was in person, to attend these conferences and the type of things they had going on down there, I could see that they needed that extra, you know, $1,000 sponsorship, you know, which we did, you know, but if it is going to be virtual like the way it is going to be, is that really still needed, that $1,000?
So what
I'm not sure where you're going to put it, but yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Zeenstra, through the chair. So what the sponsorship does is it also supports the scholarship fund for the CPAA. So we provide scholarships to the universities that have a planning and development program. So part of sponsoring is supporting the students and the student scholarships that we have. because we're not doing the, like typically, as you recall, at the conference, we would have the auction that would support that. So I do believe part of having the sponsorship is to, one, support the organization, but also to support the student scholarships.
Claus?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a question for you there. When you guys discussed this whole thing, did you also discuss of having a shorter timeline to do it? Because we all know that virtual is not as exciting as that it is that you're face to face. So with that, because it just still says from May 3rd to 5.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Vanderveen, through the chair. I'm not on that particular committee, but I know that there was lots of discussion on, to shorten it or to keep it the same. I think they kept it to the Monday to Wednesday because we had so many good speakers that we wanted to showcase that we kept it that long. And it's not to say that everybody's going to tune in to every single session. I think by doing it virtually, it really allows people, attendees, to choose which sessions they really want to come into for that 45 minutes, that hour and a half, I think is the longest ones. So although it is over the 3 days, I think there's just a lot of value seen in the types of speakers that we could retain from the previous year, and to really be able to do it virtually. We've got a great platform that we're going to be hosting it from. I know the committee that's responsible for that has been working very hard on that, and I do believe they have the conference website page up and running. So I didn't include that in here because it wasn't up and running at the time of when I wrote this, but they have that, so you can get a lot better feel of what it's going to be like. So.
Go ahead, Tori.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to follow up on Klaus's question, Hillary, are you aware of if the conference itself, will it only be available, so say I registered for it, only available for consumption in real time, or would you have the opportunity to view the conference at your own discretion, or would it only be live in real time?
That's a really good question, Councillor Campbell. I do believe if we're following the same format as some other conferences that have been held virtually over the last, say, 9 months, what's been happening is that once you're kind of paid your registration, that there are opportunities after the conference is done to view those sessions afterwards. I know with the Alberta Planning Association, that's what they did for their conference. So you could pay the $200 for the registration, and then at any time afterwards, you would be able to go in and view those sessions later. I do believe that's the format, but I can definitely confirm that for council if that's something that they're really interested in to make it so that it's, you can take it in bite-sized pieces versus all at once.
And the only reason I ask is just given the timing, it's not the greatest timing for myself. So if that opportunity was available, I would definitely consider it.
Okay, I will confirm that. I do believe that is that's what the anticipation was, but I will make sure that that's confirmed and then sent out.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, I guess we could use a motion. Claus?
I'll move that any member of council may attend the 21 CPAA annual conference, that the county council sponsors the 2020 Community Planning Association of Alberta, and the conference that was scheduled for Red Deer was for the 3rd till the 5th of 21, and that we should sponsor have the gold sponsorship for $1,000 to be utilized for the council's discretionary reserve.
Any further discussion? Call the question. Those in favor? Those opposed? Carried. Thanks, Hillary.
Thank you. And I'll work with Candace on that.
Yes, Ann?
Just a question, it's 11:45, and just being cognizant of time, we have 2 items. We have Martin's, which is his quarterly report, which may be lengthy, and, or, you know, maybe not get it done in 15 minutes. And then we have the parking, which may be able to be managed. Could we? What do you think?
Fine from our end of things and with our peace officer here to offer support and maybe help answer.
Do you mind if we switch, Martin? And then that way you won't be rushed before lunch. Okay. Good. Yep, if we're good with that. Okay, thanks, Larry.
Okay, so we're moving down to G 2.5, parking lot survey.
All right.
Yeah. I saw what was going on.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Yep, great. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Hello, council and everyone present. So, parking bylaw survey results is the title of the agenda item report before you that I'm addressing at this point. As we're all aware, the county does not currently have a parking bylaw. A draft bylaw, however, was given first reading back in the middle of September by council. And at that time, we sent out a citizen survey. However, we feel collectively that the results of that survey were kind of divided and really inconclusive. And so regarding whether the adoption of a parking bylaw is desired and needed, I guess is still up for debate. We did receive one unsolicited letter from a member of the public who had expressed concerns about parking and provided some pictures, and it's part of your package there. So again, I've touched on the fact that the bylaw, the parking bylaw for Lethbridge County sits at first reading, which was given back in September. And the survey that we put out to members of the public drew 42 responses. So not major, but not bad, you know, maybe somewhat telling. And a summary of those responses received is attached for your consideration as well. And we summarize them because the actual comments and so on themselves were, you know, fairly lengthy and, you know, and sometimes worded inappropriately, let's say, for a public agenda. So we had our communications coordinator sift through them all and provide a more concise and accurate summary of the type of responses we received. So back in 2020, last year already, back a quarter of a year ago almost, several complaints of alleged improper vehicle and trailer parking in urban and industrial areas across the county were received. They were generally in regards to large commercial vehicles parking in urban areas. And when I say urban areas, obviously our hamlets and maybe in a few instances as well, some of the larger subdivisions. As well, we received complaints about RVs parking long-term in those same urban areas. So sometimes people will just, you know, kind of leave a motorhome or an unattached trailer for months and months, and it doesn't appear to be being utilized, but, you know, maybe would be, perhaps, arguably at least, better off in an RV storage facility located somewhere else where that is permitted activity. Parking in alleys as well was a bit of an issue, and heavy vehicles parking in urban and industrial areas so as to be a nuisance and perhaps cause damage to the roads. The one there that comes to mind right off the top is in Stewart Siding, where the county has made some significant investments and improvements in the road. You know, big vehicles can cause damage if they aren't sitting properly or remain in one place for too long. So we again presented the bylaw to council back in September, and if adopted in its current form, as it is before you today, it will give the community peace officer the ability to enforce the rules when violations occur. However, again, I mentioned once already, but I'll just reiterate, based on the comments received in the bylaw, survey rather, there are definitely mixed perspectives whether there is a need to adopt a parking bylaw. Administration is also investigating the potential to establish commercial vehicle parking lots on county-owned land in or near hamlets in subdivisions, similar to the one that exists in Shaughnessy. And this was one of the suggestions that was mentioned in the survey more than once, and this could, you know, potentially help reduce commercial vehicle parking pressures in those residential areas. With respect to alternatives and pros and cons, one alternative is that council move second reading of the bylaw, but vote against it so that the bylaw dies, basically disappears, it's gone. The pros to this would be that it avoids adding more regulatory burden on county citizens and businesses, which again was one of the kind of themes of the comments coming out of the survey. The cons to that is it, of course, we're back to kind of status quo or remain at status quo, and it leaves our peace officer without much authority to enforce parking-related issues. Another alternative is just to take no further action. Maybe council's not quite at the point where they've thought about it or discussed it or pondered it enough to make a decision one way or the other. The advantage to this would be that council could leave the bylaw sitting at first reading and act on it at a later date, perhaps even another council after the next election or whatever. The drawback, or just one thing to be aware of there, is that if the bylaw sat like that and didn't receive third reading within 2 years after receiving first reading, then it would also automatically die, and that's in accordance with the Municipal Government Act. Another option, of course, is to adopt the bylaw as presented in its current form. Gives the CPO greater ability to promptly address parking issues as they might arise throughout the county. That would, however, negatively impact the flexibility that some of the RV owners and commercial vehicle operators enjoy now when it comes to parking. And again, there's some very clear opinions, and you'll see them summarized in the survey results there. Some people feel strongly that that would be a good thing. Others feel that strongly that, that would not be a positive thing, and it would drive commercial operators kind of away and make it more difficult for them to make a living. Financial impact, we don't feel there's really a tremendous amount of financial impact here. If the bylaw were to be adopted, presumably over time, there would be some revenue from fines that would likely be generated. Otherwise, we're not aware of any particular measurable financial implications, positive or negative. Our recommendation today, Mr. Chairman, and obviously back to you and council for discussion, is to move second reading of the bylaw, but vote against it so the bylaw dies. And the reason for that recommendation is that during the pandemic, when people are already facing unprecedented challenges, all of us included, imposing parking regulations may not be in the community's collective best interest at this time. Maybe it comes down to a timing issue. But again, Mr. Chairman and council, that's kind of back to you for you to debate and decide amongst yourselves.
So just a couple of questions that come to my mind is, why does it seem to be like at Stewart Siding, it's a big problem parking on the paving, and you go over to Broxburn, and that problem is not there? Like, you never see it in Broxburn. Do you think there's a reason for the difference, or is it just they did it before and they just continue to do it, or they don't have adequate room for their employees to park, or?
Maybe, our peace officer could chime in if you'd like. I think a little bit of all of those, but.
Yeah. No, thanks for your question. I think you answered your own question. I've done it for the last 35 years. Why is it a problem now? It's the response that I get, is that I get back. Like, I had a complaint out in Stewart Siding here probably 3 weeks ago now, where the way the trailer was parked, it was parked in an unsafe location right at an intersection. So I pleaded with the guy, and I took it from the angle here. This is an unsafe location. Could you at least, I would recommend you don't park here to begin with on the road. But he's been doing it for the last 35 years. So I said, can you at least move it further up ahead so that you don't block the intersection? So he did comply with that. And he did realize that, yes, he shouldn't have parked where he did.
Okay, Morris?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, that was an interesting statement you made there. They've, when the person is close to the intersection and parks something down there and it's blocking, and you don't need a parking bylaw for that. He is obstructing the view or whatever you call it, and he's wrong there already anyways. And just like you said, you talked to that person and he agreed and moved, right?
Yeah, correct, yes.
So my next question is, you talked about, I think what you did at Shaughnessy is a great idea of making the parking lot. Do we have room, and what's the cost to do it in other hamlets?
We'll get you gentlemen to answer that.
Perhaps, yeah, it was kind of a collective discussion amongst the, development
Yep.
and public works and municipal services.
Yep. Thank you for that inquiry. So currently, right now, obviously, everyone knows we have the 1 inch Shaughnessy, and one thing we're looking to do with that is just to make sure that it's signed appropriately for that staging of parking. We have looked at different sites. Iron Springs is definitely one that does have an increased amount of truck traffic coming through that area. So we are looking at some of the industrial lots that are coming forward to council that are right along the existing road, as well as east of our truck fill station, if those are potential areas that we could stage and just upgrade to a certain extent, so those could become designated truck parking for hamlets and whatnot. The cost to do this is somewhat minimal outside of the land. And since we do own land in each of these hamlets, it does become something that potentially could be quite easily done. There is always a concern around security, potentially for these operators, but this would at least give them that option for a place to stage their piece of equipment for their truck, primarily trucks.
So Michael, one more question. Like in the city of Lethbridge, you do not see many RVs parked for any longer than the weekend, say, or a couple days during the week. Is there a bylaw that they can't park on the street in the city, or they have to move them to their lot in the back, or what is that?
Yeah, I can answer that question. Yeah, they do have a bylaw here in the city that I think it's like 24 hours that you can
Okay.
have an unattached RV and then it has to be moved. You can park it on your property.
Right.
365 days of the year, but it can only be 24 hours on the street.
Ann?
Just for that, they do have a bylaw, but I live on the south side, and there are RVs that are bigger than people's houses that are parked on the street, and they never get moved. So while they do have a bylaw, they're very reluctant to enforce it. And there's a lot of RVs parked like on 14th Street, 15th Street, and they stay there for many months. So
No, we're just speculating, just stating a fact.
Okay, any other questions or discussion? Go ahead, Claus.
Well, then I'll move that the second reading of the bylaw, but we expect everybody to vote against it, so it dies.
That's quite a motion. I don't think I would have to say that's...
I wouldn't buy the recommendation.
Robert's Rules, wherever that fellow is, will love you guys.
It's a new one. I could just see it, subsection 12. Yes?
Just a comment, just from Jeremy's comment of having access for parking in Hamlet, I think that's a good idea, but I think the next step would be to proceed with something to keep the heavy trucks off the residential areas and come up with some sort of a parking bylaw in the future, though. But I think the first step would be to at least have access for them to park somewhere within their communities or next to their community, I guess would be the important one.
Ann?
Further to Council Steve Campbell's comment, then we should maybe add that just as direction to staff to move towards those parking, if that's something that council wants.
Claus?
For clarity.
I think maybe we should make a separate motion for that.
Oh, yeah, we'd have to. Because we have a motion on the floor to move second reading but not vote for it. So, okay, are there any further discussion on the second reading? Seeing not, those in favor? Those opposed? Oh, it's defeated. Gee, okay.
To make sure you don't stick up the wrong hand.
Yeah. So, Claus, if you want to make the other motion, go ahead.
The other motion would be, I would move that we consider in the future looking at some other parking places, and with that, not put a bylaw in place till we have that in place, because I think that's very important that we don't do it that way. Yeah.
Any discussion on that? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in favor? Those opposed? Carried. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I guess it's lunchtime.
Kind of from just before Christmas to the present time. And I don't think it will come as any surprise to anyone here that with the ongoing pandemic, it has had an impact and it has changed the dynamics of how economic development is proceeding at the moment. For example, I'm not doing any in-person visits to any of the businesses just for public health and safety reasons, or the dynamics of scheduling that. It's just not something that makes sense at this time. I am trying to keep my finger on the pulse of the business community as much as I can. Anecdotally, there's still businesses that are checking in. Some of it is just because they are looking at potential future expansion plans, or want general information, which they always do. Sometimes it's about inquiries about getting connected to various government programs and so forth. So in that sense, I've been able to maintain some of those ties that are so important and so valuable, and again, gather intelligence about what's going on. But in terms of what I've actually been working on over the last 3 months, I think it's important for council to be aware of some of that and have a chance to ask questions as necessary. So we're continuing on with some of the infrastructure work and support for economic development around the county. One of the big ones, of course, was internet service and provision. You'll recall Peter Sekulik made his presentation to you last October, where it was recommended not to pursue the fiber ring auction, but to go in a different direction, let the private sector provide solutions for county businesses and county residents. So actually, on that note, we actually had a meeting with TELUS yesterday, and Doug and myself and the regional rep for TELUS and local reps, to talk about what's coming down the pipeline in terms of technological developments, and also ways that we can maybe move things ahead a little bit more quickly at TELUS. So not to jump the queue exactly, but to make sure that our projects and smaller things can be done in the right time. And so that was very helpful, and Doug and I are going to travel with the local TELUS technician around the county along Highway 3 and along Highway 4 to look at some areas where we might be able to have some quick wins and improve internet service in those areas. And that discussion will be ongoing. So that's one of the things. In terms of water and wastewater, that remains kind of a constant challenge or issue. But again, we're working away on that. There is some interest in development just to the east of the city in the Chinook, or what will one day be the Chinook Industrial Park, just north of Rave, getting some inquiries and some opportunities to explore that a little bit. And then there's continued inquiries along Highway 3, several businesses there that are looking at expanding. Again, the pandemic has kind of put the brakes on some of it, but they are interested in moving forward, probably in this calendar year. So that's been very good. Speaking of Highway 3, we continue to promote the two main highway corridors in Lethbridge County. Highway 3, Canada's premier food corridor, and Highway 4, Canada's Western Gateway, as major development corridors, not just for the county, but for the surrounding municipalities. So we co-develop and co-market them as attractive places for businesses to take place. So I think I've shown council in the past Canada's premier food corridor, the Highway 3 website. Within the next few weeks, we should have the Highway 4 website up and running. So it gives it a bit more of a presence, a bit more of a location. Another significant project that we're working on, and I'm happy to work on this with our communications coordinator, Maddie, is the development of a business directory. And I think Anne alluded to that earlier in this meeting. So this is a voluntary program, and basically we're going to have county businesses that wish to be listed on this directory. They will be able to list. It will be at no charge to them. It will be at no charge to the county, and we keep the responsibility of the listings with the businesses. So they're the ones that have control over what information they want to include, and they also have the responsibility or control of keeping that information up to date. It is reviewed by county staff. Maddie and myself will keep our eyes on it to make sure that everything's copacetic with what's listed. But it's a way that we can give them some more prominence and give businesses an avenue for business-to-business work as well. So that should be up and running in early April, and then we'll just keep adding businesses as they so choose to come in. We continue to explore additional revenue opportunities for the county. So, for example, the presentation by Ridge Utilities today, that's been kind of in the works for about a month and a half. Council, of course, got to hear firsthand this morning and can decide when the report comes forward how they want to proceed. But again, it's something new. It's something that would potentially offer us some additional revenue and also would be good potentially for our residents and our businesses, offering them better rates, opportunities to save on that. So that's good as well. And then finally, kind of looking ahead, the pandemic will come to an end. There's more and more vaccination taking place. My own mother has already gotten her first shot of the Pfizer vaccine, so that's kind of nice. And so myself and other economic development officers in the region and the province are kind of looking ahead. What's the recovery going to look like? How can we help and support the businesses without being in their way, and what's appropriate? So we're having discussions around that and how we might be able to do that effectively. And of course, we're going to take feedback from the businesses. What do they need? What do they want? And work within that. We don't want to be doing something that they feel is unnecessary or they can do just as well for themselves. And finally, I just wanted to offer one final little riff because my colleague Hillary had presented the sponsorship opportunity for the planning conference, and the fact that the county supports that and that the funds for that support students that are going into planning. Well, two of our former applied study students, Fabio Coppola and Tristan Scholten, they actually have gone on for careers in planning. Well, Fabio was actually working at Invistec up in Edmonton. He went through the planning program at the University of Calgary and is now working up in Edmonton successfully. And Tristan Scholten has applied for the master's program of planning at the University of Calgary. So there's a bit of a connection there. Some of the students that we've hosted here and have worked with here are actually moving on in that realm and getting their education and doing careers there, which I think is a good thing. So I just thought I'd give that as a little bit of interesting information for council as well. So on that note, I'll leave it there, and Mr. Chairman, should yourself or other councillors wish to ask questions, please feel free to do so.
Thanks, Martin. I do have a couple of questions, actually.
Oh, yeah, I will.
And the first one would be, when you talked about internet service to businesses, what is the average, what do they require? Like, I'm curious whether or not, because TELUS has got this incredible deal on right now with the hub, and the guys this morning talked about the orange disc thing. And of course, Elon Musk's system. But the only thing I've heard about it is very expensive, but very fast. So what do they need? Like, what would the average business need? Is this TELUS thing good enough to get them started, or is it not big enough, or?
Mr. Chairman, that's an excellent question, and it's a little bit hard to answer because different businesses have such different needs. For example, one of the large canola processing plants on Highway 3, they send large volumes of data to their head office, like huge amounts of data. Their plant itself doesn't need a lot of internet capacity, but where they have had challenges is they've actually lost packets of data just because the capacity is not good enough to support that. So there's one example of what they need. For some of the other businesses, and here I will mention them by name because I don't think it's any big secret, but the Kings and Whole Leaf both make use of robots, fairly extensive use of robots. And there, they need the wireless to be able to, the robots aren't on wires, they actually get the instructions wirelessly. So there they need the capacity and the strength to kind of handle that and to transmit it. Smaller businesses might have more modest needs. So it's hard for me to give you a definitive answer, like they all need, they all want as much as they can get as cheaply as possible, and they want it to be reliable and fast. But kind of everybody's exact needs kind of varies business to business. I think for the smaller businesses, some of TELUS's newer offerings, and for more remote businesses, potentially Starlink might offer some solutions. But along Highway 3 and Highway 4, and TELUS acknowledges this, there's capacity to do more kind of almost on an industrial level or industrial strength internet. And I think for some of our larger businesses and producers, that's important. That's what they need, is, you know, really high capacity, high speed, and again, that reliability factor as well.
Okay, thank you. Claus?
Well, my question was along that same point as Lauren's there. With the internet service, with the, you in along with these people, did they make you any promises or that, like, how long is it going to take before we're going to get better? Because we're in the same situation at home too, with the robotics and everything like that. We, all of a sudden the internet kicks out, you're shafted. You know, and then you just, it does come back on, but I mean, you got little spaces in between there. And with, Lauren mentioned that too with Elon Musk, these satellites that they're shooting in the air, like thousands of them already, is that being done?
Mr. Chairman, through to Councillor Vanderveen, thank you for your questions, Councillor Vanderveen. With the conversation we had with TELUS, it was about an hour-and-a-half meeting. There were no specific promises made, and I don't think they could offer specific promises and timelines to us. But one thing that they did give us insight into is kind of how better to access the queue of projects and how better to get ourselves positioned in them. And they acknowledged that in the past, TELUS, the model that TELUS was using was not very responsive to customers and businesses, but they did indicate that this has changed over the last maybe couple of years. TELUS has realized that, you know, the way it was going wasn't working, and they're doing it a little bit differently. So I would hope, kind of in a partial answer to your question, I would hope that possibly some smaller projects would take place in Lethbridge County this year that would provide improvement for certain businesses and residents. Where exactly, I can't say, and they didn't give any indication. But as we get more into the queue and we kind of understand better what they need, the information they need from us to be able to kind of prioritize projects, we'll be able to get more stuff into the queue and hopefully see things going faster. It was interesting, their comments about Starlink. They actually tried to avoid mentioning them, I think just kind of almost semi-jokingly. But, you know, TELUS, of course, is directly competing with Starlink. And, you know, they kind of said, you know, hey, Starlink is great, the technology is great. They see Starlink as kind of really benefiting the more remote, like if TELUS can't get there, they don't mind if Starlink takes it because it's not a customer TELUS would have anyway. That's kind of how they were positioning it. What I'm noticing anecdotally from many businesses, at least so far, is that many businesses still want that physical connection. Like the idea of a satellite connection is something that I think they'll have to warm up to. But right now, they much prefer a physical connection, so fiber or some other way of connecting, and probably with an existing Alberta company. You know, Starlink is still quite new, and where are they headquartered, and if you have a problem, who do you call? That's all quite new. So again, I think things will continue to evolve in that sphere, but I was very pleased after yesterday's meeting. I think we can do more and better with TELUS than we have in the past, and there's some promise there.
Okay, so there's a lot of the smaller providers that are in rural areas and stuff. Where did they connect to? Do you know that?
Mr. Chairman, through to Councillor Vanderveen, that would be almost something we'd have to bring Peter Sekulik back to. A lot of the infrastructure, like there's kind of almost like a base of infrastructure, and then the various providers, whether they're large ones like your TELUS, your Bell, your Shaw, and the smaller ones, they can kind of share it to a certain degree. How exactly that is structured, again, you'd need somebody with the expertise of a Peter to be able to explain that. There's certainly smaller operators that are working, like ExploreNet and a few others. In an email that he sent recently, Peter was kind of like, I'm not sure what these larger developments with what Starlink is doing and what TELUS is doing, what it's going to mean for the smaller ones. Like he was kind of iffy on on their long-term potential there. But we'll continue to work with them, and in fact, we did supply a letter of support for one of the smaller ones that was seeking some federal money. So we'll work with them too, for sure.
Any other questions? Oh, Tori.
Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Maybe just to follow up on Klaus's comment on Starlink, just from some very rough looking that I did, it is available currently in its beta form initially. If you go to their website, you can input your address, and it'll tell you what kind of service you would receive, the costing, and just for a personal comparison, for what I'm paying now for a point-to-point wireless point-to-point, the Starlink is over twice as much money per month, but your level of service is considerably higher. Your speeds are considerably higher. But as Lauren pointed out, the hardware cost, you do wear that as well. So just a rough number, I think like $800 probably, just to get you in to the service, and then your service charge per month. Like I say, probably twice what I'm paying personally, but if you, like I said, it is available, and you can do that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, to the Councillor Campbell, thank you. That's actually really helpful to have a real world example from right here in the county. One thing that TELUS did share with us yesterday as well is that they have opened, and I think this probably won't come as news to everybody here, but they have opened TELUS Agriculture, a new division, and it's only been kind of going for a year, and they've only kind of publicly announced it about 2 months ago, and they've been buying up all kinds of companies. And so two of TELUS's big initiatives that's going to make use of their internet and telephony main business, but kind of specialized areas that they're going to focus on, are agriculture and health. So Teresa Lynn, the TELUS representative, kind of the area manager, she said it's so new, she can't give us exact details of what all is going to be encompassed and what all services are going to be provided to the agricultural community. But TELUS is making a big play there. She claimed that this actually made, with all the deals that TELUS has made to build TELUS Agriculture, it's one of the largest agricultural services companies in the world, just based on what they've done. So that's going to provide some interesting possibilities for the future as well. She said TELUS is keenly aware of like robotic combines, GPS for pivots, irrigation pivots. TELUS is aware that need, the developments are going in that direction in agriculture, and that producers are going to be able to, are going to need to have access to reliable, high-speed, high-capacity internet. So again, as Peter indicated last October, things are changing very rapidly. It looks like the private sector is adjusting, and I guess maybe to kind of bring things around to what you were saying, Councillor Campbell, is that different solutions, different private sector solutions might be in order for different private sector companies and producers within the county. For some, Starlink might make sense. For some, TELUS, as TELUS develops, it might make sense. Maybe some of the smaller companies might provide niche services here and there. But I think that Peter's recommendation last October was a good one, to leave it in the hands of the private sector, because the private sector is moving in this area and is aware of the needs that producers and companies have.
Any other questions? Go ahead, Martin.
If I may, I did forget to mention one item, and Anne reminded me. And just on the subject of, it was the wind turbine in the northwest of the county. We continue to have discussions there with Gord, I believe it is, and monitor that one as well. And another little bit of information, Lethbridge Biogas is of course continuing to work on their expansion, but somebody has come back from the dead, potentially, and that is Kyoto, and then it was in Vigor, and now it's Canary Biofuel. So I just received word that they have resurrected themselves or reincarnated themselves in a new form with new investors and everything. And they anticipate they're going to add more equipment there to the facility there at Duncan Park. A new distillation tower will go in and some other things. And then they hope to be up and running before the end of this year. Now, just the one caveat, I've been here now officially 8 years, I believe to the day, today, 8 years here at the county. I think the whole time I've been here, that plant has always been about 2 or 3 months away from up and running. So don't hold your breaths quite yet. You know, we've heard this story before, but I just, you know, there have been some questions. What's going to happen to it? Are they going to dismantle it? Is it done? Well, it seems to maybe have a second life. So on the renewable energy side as well, between what Anne said and these others, things continue to happen too.
That's interesting, because at the price of canola right now, that would not be very profitable choice, but.
And corn and everything.
Yeah, it's. Go ahead, Mark.
Well, potentially, Mr. Chairman, good points. I didn't mean to interrupt the conversation here. Apparently, one thing that the new distillation tower and some of the new equipment will allow multiple feedstocks, so not just canola and or corn, but they will take other feedstocks in as well. So maybe that's part of the addressing. And to Councillor Zeenstra's comment there, I'm sure that there's been a certain amount of government money that has flown into this most recent effort as well.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Martin, and they're taking dead stock now too?
I'm sorry?
Lethbridge Biogas?
Lethbridge Biogas, they're taking
yes.
dead stock now too,
Yes.
yeah. And, well, they had a big influx there, wasn't it, for 5 years? Wasn't it $60 million or something like that, a number of years ago? So is that deadline looming soon, or is that past already?
This is Lethbridge Biogas or
Yeah.
the Canary Biofuels?
Okay, yeah.
No, I'm just.
This is just a different question that I had there.
Right. I'm not sure about that. I could certainly follow up. I was just having a conversation with Lauren Peterson of Canary Biofuels yesterday, so this information is hot off the press. I do have a very good relationship with Stefan Mikowski at Lethbridge Biogas. I can certainly follow up, because I'm not 100% sure about how that's working.
Then the other question I had, that was on your the deadline, or we're going to see an end of the virus and everything like that, and the economy is going to be picking up. And what kind of expectations would you think, as economic development officer, are you going to get from these people that are, because there's a lot of them struggling, and what do you think that we could do? And it's not going to be money, because we don't have that either.
Mr. Chairman, through to Councillor Vanderveen, that's an excellent question and a very big question. The dynamics of how the recovery is going to happen in the different municipalities and across the different sectors, it's going to be interesting to see. And the way that municipalities and economic development officers can offer support, non-financial support, is going to be different depending on what it is. One of the things that the economic development officers, the information that we're trying to gather now, is anticipating the end of the pandemic. What do the different businesses need? Obviously, for Lethbridge County, food and beverage, like restaurants and bars and hospitality, hotels and everything, aren't a huge part of our local economy, but it is significant for Lethbridge, you know. So what Lethbridge does to support and promote those sectors will not be directly relevant to us, or at least not to a larger degree. For us, of course, agriculture is so much larger, and how agriculture has been affected and impacted by this is sometimes a little bit more subtle, a little bit different. And, you know, if you're a wholesale producer, what's happening with wholesale prices. So I'm going to try and tailor it to the needs of the county businesses, the main sectors. And again, you know, try with that promotion, that reminder, support local, buy local? Can we promote locally, not with the cost of money, but just in terms of attention, in terms of maybe marketing with other municipalities, what our producers are doing here? Because you're quite correct, there's not a lot of money available for this, but hopefully we can help them do what they do best, their business do what they do best, and get back on their feet. So it's a little bit hard to answer with definitive steps, but agreed, it has to be really without money or without much money, because that's not available. But I think that promotion and highlighting and boosting their presence can only help.
Go ahead, Ann.
And I think, just as Martin alluded to earlier too, a lot of things that we do here are a kind of facilitation. So we make those arrangements with somebody like TELUS, and we find an inroad there to help the businesses with broadband or that type of situation. So we have been doing a lot of facilitation, and we will be doing a lot more facilitation so that the businesses can get access to the things that they need.
Tori?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Maybe a question to Martin and maybe to Ann as well. You touched on the wind turbines in the north part of the county. Last week, I traveled north through Vulcan County, up 845 through that way. And once you hit Vulcan County, at every intersection along the way, there was a sign at every major intersection. Either said, protect our community, no turbines, value our community more than turbines, large 4x8 sheets of plywood. I guess just my question to you as an economic development officer, and maybe Ann as administration, how do we get ahead of that? I know when we had I think I believe anyways that this stuff is inevitable. The solar, the wind, it's inevitable. It's coming. It has to come. So how do we get ahead of it where we can engage our citizens, engage the public, and try and maybe, as opposed to fighting it at the time, how do we engage, I guess? And the only reason I say that is because I know when we had the proposals for solar, I was against it, and I said not here, not on this irrigated land, and I was criticized for not being open for business. The county's not open for business. So I guess just looking down the road, how do you see balancing that, Martin, where we want to be open for business, we want to encourage that because there's obviously a financial side of it that the county needs that. We're seeing our other funding streams go away, but how do we also manage public expectation and like I say, just maybe get ahead of it, I guess.
I can take it.
Oh, and I'll add, but you go ahead. No, you go ahead first, Ann. And
Okay.
I'll add.
One of the things we're trying to do, and we've been talking a lot about this internally, is that we need to be really proactive with the public, because there is a lot of information out there. So we're looking at various platforms of public engagement. We're always trying different kind of ways, but we have to explain to the public, I think, very clearly that we have limited funds available. We don't have a lot of linear taxation, so with our minimal amount, how are we going to spend those dollars? And you're right, it's always this balance of, bringing in business with, what are we? We are an agricultural hub, so we have to protect that. So council has to make some really hard decisions over the next little while, but we need the public to know exactly what we're facing. And I think that is the most important piece. There is a public engagement platform that we're looking at right now that would help us reach out to the public, and it's fairly cost prohibitive. It's very good, but aside from us trying to do it, bringing in some experts who know how to engage the public and know how to reach out to those different stakeholders, we could be doing a much better job than we are at that. And I think we need to start addressing that.
Go ahead, Martin.
No, I think it's an excellent question, Councillor Campbell, and I think it's one to consider. I agree 100% with what Ann said. I just offer some additional thoughts or comments from the economic development perspective on this. One is, I think it's very good. The communication is important, and the transparency. I think that, if you if we, not you, if we are open and honest and say, the future of Lethbridge County will include, renewable energy in addition to agriculture and everything else, then that kind of, I think, has an opportunity to kind of percolate out into the residents and so forth. It doesn't come as a surprise. And then, when it comes time, potentially there's an application for a solar farm or for a wind farm, that, we have the open houses, we don't try and hide it or sweep it under the rug, and, and address those questions. And in some cases, it won't be our questions or our answers to provide. It will be up to the companies wanting to do it, to provide the information and address the concerns that the residents have. But that openness and transparency, I think, are key. And if it's wrapped up in good communication in general and a good plan, I think that can go a long way to dispelling conflict and opposition, some of which is probably inevitable because you'll never please 100% of the people 100% of the time. How I see the opportunity I see for the county, and I think we have a great opportunity here, is that we can become a real powerhouse, pardon the language, in terms of top quality food, agri-food production. We already do that. We already have those routes established, well established. We want to continue to develop them. But what we haven't had in the past, and what the opportunity is for us, is we haven't had a lot on the energy front. We don't have a lot of oil and gas here, not a lot of linear assessment from that. We don't have coal, we never have. So we haven't really been players in the energy sector. And I think what's going to happen, and I agree, I think it's inevitable, just because we get so much wind, so much sun, and we have a lot of biomass here, is those companies are going to come to this area, Lethbridge County and the surrounding municipalities, wanting to do those kinds of developments here. And instead of kind of looking and saying, well, we have to fight it, or it's one thing wins and one thing loses, to say here's an opportunity, and for our residents to understand, here's an opportunity for Lethbridge County to have sustainable sectors that aren't going away. Like, with coal mining, well, we see the controversy there has been about coal mining in the mountains, and how much longer is coal going to be relevant, and all those kinds of things. I think we have sectors here, people are going to have to eat for as long as there's people. So, food is not going away, agri-food is not going away. We're going to need energy in some form or another. Energy needs are not going away. And if we can be producing energy sustainably using the natural resources that we have here, sunlight, wind, biomass, again, it's something that, for the foreseeable future, decades in the future, I see as, being a pillar for the county's economy. So maybe it's also for us, and maybe that falls on my shoulders, but with council and senior management support, to be able to share that vision and say, here's where we see the county going in terms of business and in terms of, economic sectors. And yes, there's renewables out there, and we want to be transparent, we want to be open, but we also want everybody to understand the opportunity that's there for the county, for its residents, for its businesses to develop that sector and profit from it. So it's a long answer, but it's probably worth a discussion at a workshop, a real full discussion. But I see it as an opportunity. And I think that as the technology advances too, the potential for agriculture and renewable energy to operate in the same space, literally and figuratively, will get better as well, so that we don't have to necessarily sacrifice farmland or as much farmland to reap the benefits of renewable energy. So I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, that was a very long answer, but it's a good question. It's a big topic for discussion.
Good, thank you. Any other questions? So Martin, I have one other question, and I know you didn't touch on this in your report, but a couple of maybe 3 months ago, we talked about vehicle charging stations for electric vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
I actually have been kind of shocked lately. I have 2 neighbors now who have bought electric cars.
Okay.
What is the process of that happening with those, like we were talking about, they might go into golf courses or things like that. Have you heard any more about those charging stations?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's a good question. We, through South Grow, have applied for charging stations in the county. And I'll be honest, I haven't followed up with Peter Casarella the last couple of months ever since that application went in. But the good news is that if that application is approved or that grant is approved, we'd get several charging stations at no cost to the county. And it may be something that we can even build on, even if we don't get approved. Maybe there'll be the opportunity to buy some at reduced cost or enhance what we're given, get so and so many free, and the county could buy several more if it wants, or county businesses could choose to buy them. Again, I think it's something that is going to come more and more, and it would be probably also something that that council may want to consider at some point. Do we have charging stations at county facilities? If Lethbridge County was to partner with Ridge Utilities, is there an opportunity maybe for some revenue to come out of that? Again, bigger picture questions, I suppose. But the good news is that we're in line, hopefully, to get some free ones, and I'll find out from Peter Casarella where we're at with that.
Thank you. Any other questions? I guess not. Thanks very much, Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, members of council, for your interest and your questions.
I'll move that we take Martin's information, quarterly report for information.
That's okay. Thanks, Martin.
Any discussion? Call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Next, we have the G3 Community Corporate Services, and that's the Picture Butte Rural Crime Watch request.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As council probably recalls, on February 11th, Lyle Adams made a presentation on behalf of the Picture Butte District Rural Crime Watch Association with regards to their activities, and also made a request to council for some funds to help them with their operations. The request that was made was to provide the Picture Butte District Rural Watch Association with $1,000 a year for a period of 5 years beginning 2021. The recommendation, if council were to go this route, is that could be funded from the council donation reserve on an annual basis. Currently, council within the budget puts 50 cents per capita into the donation reserve, so about $5,175. So funds are being put in there annually and pulled from depending on the requests that come forward. So it would be very little, if any, impact other than that, I guess, withdrawal from the reserve annually of $1,000. So, according to Mr. Adams, the funds would assist them with some of the challenges they've had with regards to membership participation and engagement, and would just assist with their overall operational expenses such as signage, advertising, and community messaging. So as noted here, there's a couple alternatives. It could be to provide 1-year funding to the Picture Butte Rural Watch Association, so $1,000 annually, which again would have little impact to the county's operations or reserves. The con, if you want to look at it this way, is it only supports one group financially for 1 year versus 5 years for the request. You could provide no financial support. The pro would be that there would be no financial impact to the budget or reserves, and that it does not support this volunteer group. According to some research that was done by Candace, the Picture Butte Crime Association is the only one located within the county that is registered with the Alberta Provincial Crime Watch Association, and they cover the whole south half of the county, just as a side note there.
The whole north half, don't you mean?
Did I say south half? I might have put south half in there. I apologize.
Yeah. No, that's fine. Well, I think it's a no-brainer. I think anybody who's willing to help out, I think that's a great deal. So, Steve?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I agree. They're trying to do something good for the community, and just to show them a little support, it would be great. A few years ago, did we make a donation to the Did McNally have a association? I thought we made a donation to them 4 or 5 years ago, or are they not active, or?
I'm not sure to what extent they're active anymore. I think it's the same, basically the same kind of problem as the same people been doing it forever, and they're getting tired of doing it. So I'm not sure of its exact status, but I believe we did give them some money. Yeah, go
Just
ahead.
add, Mr. Chairman, with that note, they may still be active. It's just Pitcher Butte is the only one that is actually registered that we could find within the county.
So, go ahead, Klaus.
Well, I think it's a great idea. I think that, with everything that's going on especially in the area of Picture Butte, I think that it's well-deserved that these people are putting an effort into to doing the crime watch and to stay in contact with the RCMP and everything like that. I think it's a worth cause, and I would really like to support that.
So you making that motion?
Sure.
For how many years?
I would like to do it for 5 years because they need the money to be able to build on a longer term than just the short one term in and out, because I think that that would not be as effective as that we do it for 5 years.
Any further discussion? Call for the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Let's move down to G 3.2, Municipal Operating Support Transfer Program.
Thank you. So our last meeting was on February 11th, and I believe I had mentioned at that meeting that we weren't aware of any funding from the province with regards to COVID support. And on February 12th, we got a phone call from the province saying that there was funding available called the Municipal Operating Support Transfer Grant. So the purpose of this program is to provide municipalities with one-time funding to assist with lost revenues or to cover expenses that were incurred due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Municipal Affairs contacted the county to notify us that a memorandum of understanding agreement was required to be signed in effort to ensure that we were eligible for the most funds, is the acronym for the program. At this time, Lethbridge County would be eligible for up to $1,053,334 under the program. So the funding program itself will support lost revenues, as mentioned, including 2020 unpaid taxes as of March 31st, 2021. So any balance of the 2020 levy that has not been collected as of March 31st, the county can receive funds for that as well, and does not have to pay that money back once those taxes are paid in the future. So that's some additional incentive to go ahead with this. It will also cover any expenses we've incurred. As mentioned, we had about $30,000 in sanitizers, wipes, masks, those kinds of items, gloves that have been purchased. That would be covered. We are looking into, I haven't gotten confirmation yet as to whether or not some of the computer purchases would be included in that, but I believe a portion of them would if we could prove that it was for the purpose of working at home due to the pandemic. So there are quite a few things we can apply for. We had to have the memorandum of understanding signed, which Anne has signed, but we wanted to notify council that this program is available and we do intend to submit for it. So it's any expenses as of March 31st, 2021, and then we have to submit to the province by July 2nd, I believe is the date. And just as a note, when this program was announced, I had Kennedy just pull up the 2020 unpaid balances, and it was around the $800,000 mark for just 2020. We can also look into some losses due to deferring penalties. That might be a little bit tougher on the utility side, but with taxes, it's pretty easy.
So Jen, when you say unpaid taxes, does that also include like the oil and gas companies that have not paid us?
My intention is to include those. Okay. We'll have to see though, because they might defer them to the orphaned well program, I guess, that they're working on. But yeah, I would like to include them, at least the 2020 levy, and see what we could get.
Because at Mears and Reeves the other day, when Jason made his reports from RMA, he was talking about a lot of companies have now just decided that because they don't technically have to pay the taxes because there's nothing to seize, that a lot of companies have just decided we're not paying it anyway. So I don't know whether that number is going to go up significantly this year because of people thinking like that, or
I hope not. I guess we're in a fortunate position in the county that we're not reliant on.
we're not reliant, yeah.
On that. We do have some, though. On the good news front, though, we did have one, although they were only 1 year in arrears, company where over half of their property and assets sold. So another company has taken over and covered a good portion of that outstanding tax. So there is some activity taking place, but we also have a number that haven't been operating for a few years.
Okay. Any other questions? We need a motion then? To support this? Morris?
I'll let him move back.
To support the application.
Yeah.
Any further discussion? Call for the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you.
Yeah, I think I'm still here.
And let's move down to administration, G 4.1. Oh, sorry, one ahead of myself. 3.3, year-end surplus report.
Yes, so, Mr. Chairman and Council, through the year-end process in preparation for the upcoming audit, which will begin on Monday of next week, the financial statements have resulted in an operational surplus of $125,707. On March 11th, I presented some projections based on where we were at with the financials at that time. Of course, I believe I had mentioned there were still some entries to be done. There's always late payables that come through, funding, reviewing and making sure I didn't miss any reserve transfer resolutions, items like that. So I had at that time projected about a $322,000 surplus. That has been reduced, as you can see, to $125,707. I can speak to some of those changes. The largest, most specific one would be within the Public Works Department, as the year-end inventory was being completed as well, which is a process that's done in Picture Butte. There was a balancing adjustment with regards to the year-end gravel pit reclamation costs. So we have had in the past the measurements done both internally and externally, and then there's costs associated with that. It's put into the inventory system and creates a cost, obviously. So there's an adjustment there. Some of this is just due to cost changes, as well as having a new staff member, and I apologize as I can't recall what Graham White's title is off the top of my head, but he's managing a lot more of those types of programs in-house and is doing the measuring. So that was a $110,000 adjustment within the inventory, but the costs reflect on the financial side too. So that actually brings us more current and up to date with those costs related to that inventory. I think everybody got a copy of what my projections were that I brought forward the last time. Overall, I was fairly close, I guess, maybe off here and there. The total difference from the projection to what we're presenting today is just shy of $62,000. So of course there's some ins and outs or revenues and expenditures that create that. As mentioned, that Public Works one is amongst the largest. I also wanted to highlight that the operational transfers that we do, which are part of the budget for the 3 departments being fleet, utilities, and IT, which more or less operate at cost recovery. The fleet department had a surplus of about $243,000, which was transferred to the capital reserve prior to what's being presented here as part of the budget. And this was primarily from contract and general services and some savings within the fuel budget that created that surplus. Utilities Department, with the exception of the $327,000 for the debenture payment, had a surplus of $333,000, or $334 almost, and this is just due to water sales throughout the 2020 year and costs. And the IT department actually had a bit of a deficit, which we kind of projected, and it was just under $15,000, and that was covered through the IT operating reserve. So those transfers were done as part of the year-end process as cost recovery departments. This year, through the surplus transfer, I provided two options. I know when I'm kind of looking at the bottom line, I'm thinking we have $15,458,000 of tax revenues that we're requesting, or tax support that we're requesting and putting out, and we've spent $15 million less than that. So that's how I come up with the surplus deficit. But I know last year, Mr. Chairman, it was mentioned that council would like to see the transfers to and from reflect by the department deficit rather than by the overall. So I gave that as an option as well to transfer to and from. So if you look at option A, we would fund the deficits within the Public Works Department, the Ag Services Department, and the Finance Department, and then transfer the surpluses by department to the appropriate reserve. So Council, CAO's office, Infrastructure Services, the Assessment Department, Community Services, Planning and Development, and Emergency Services all had surpluses. And once those transfers to and from are complete, it would be a wash, I guess. It would zero out any surpluses or deficits. Or the second option I provided was just to take the overall surplus and transfer it to the Emergency Services and Administrative Reserves, as they did, as Planning and Development and Emergency Services had the largest surpluses for the year. I know that was really quick.
Yes, go ahead. Sorry, Steve.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So option B is sort of the surplus is paying all the department deficits?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I personally, I don't like option A. It gets to the point that some departments, you're going to have to re-inject some money. If they're going to pay their deficit out of the reserve, well, at some point, you have to re-inject some money into those reserves, I would think. To me, I just look at the bottom line and look at everything as a whole, not just department by department.
Yeah, we do need a motion.
Then I'll make a motion that, for option B, that we move that the reallocation of funds from unrestricted surplus to restricted surplus be transferred to and from, as per the chart below, for emergency services and administrative reserve.
Any further discussion? So now that you have this other person in place in Public Works, you feel that you're going to get a little better handle on what's happening out there, or?
Yeah, I fully expect that portion. One thing I think that also needs to be mentioned. Oh, sorry. Yes, no, I mean, as far as accuracy, I mean, we're doing drone surveys on a regular basis, and we're going to be doing those quarterly to make sure that lots of those adjustment amounts are not going to be a recurring problem. As well as he's been working on cleaning up all of our backlog of gravel pit compliance with AEP. One other thing I wanted to touch on services portion, I know it's kind of highlighted in there. The grant portion, the grant adjustment that we put into the 2021 budget was a difference of $130,000. So that $130,000 is reflected in the current operating budget, and we still do not have any specifics around whether or not we will be receiving anything more than just the basic ASB grant. The resource management portion is still on hold. But we have not counted on that resource management funding coming through in the budget. So 2021 should be more accurate.
Any other discussion? Seeing none. Oh. Did you have a question, Ken? No. Oh. Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, Anne had also asked that I do a really quick presentation on reserves. I know we had been kind of trying to do this for a couple months, but the meetings were getting long. It's a pretty 10-minute probably presentation just for information. So I'll do that quick.
Bob, that was a contented sigh, wasn't it?
So this presentation is just for the purpose of, I guess, defining municipal reserves and the difference between our operating and capital reserves and the municipal reserve, which is formerly known as the Land Trust Fund. I also have some paperwork I forgot to bring in, but RMA has a really good document on reserves as well that I made copies for council to hand out, so I'll make sure you get those. This, in fact, I believe did come right from the RMA presentation. So the purpose of the reserve is to develop a standard practice this is from our policy. A standard practice that will enhance Lethbridge County's financial strength, flexibility, and cash flow management, as well as to help sustain infrastructure needs at an adequate level to ensure delivery of services and support of the county's strategic long-range plan. So within the reserve policy, we state that we want to maintain and improve Lethbridge County's working capital requirements, provide for future operating and capital requirements, address the overall current and future initiatives of the county, and provide for offsetting unanticipated fluctuations in operating and capital activities. Why do we maintain the reserves? So this financial reserves are an effective tool to support municipal asset management planning. The reserves are not a measurement of wealth per se, but rather are a planning tool to be used in different ways and to different extents by municipalities. Municipalities are not permitted to run deficit budgets, as we know through the Municipal Government Act. So reserves allow municipalities to save money for major infrastructure projects while following the legislative requirements. Municipalities can finance capital projects through debt. The amount of debt municipalities may incur is limited. Additionally, due to interest requirements, debt results in higher costs for municipalities and is therefore less efficient use of tax dollars. So reserves can offset potentially the need for debt. And municipalities are required to develop 3-year operating and 5-year capital plans. The development of the long-range planning requires that municipalities have the ability to set aside funds for major projects in future years. So as we know, and I'm sure many of you have heard through your colleagues, some municipalities rely heavily on transfers from reserves within their operating budget as a way of eliminating or reducing their reliance on debt or an increase in annual tax support. There could be some questions around the sustainability of that. Every time you incur debt, it has to get paid back. And anytime you're not increasing taxes, eventually that will catch up and the reserves will run out. So, however, reserves can provide a portion of an annual operating budget, either as a transfer for future capital, or as mentioned, you could fund projects or offset some increases on maybe one-off projects, etc. Transfers to reserves for future capital are not required, oh, I have a spelling error there, apologize, to be designated for specific use. We generally, within the county, well, we do have a reserve policy, and when we are doing transfers to capital reserves, we are specifying in most cases what a lot of those, the use of those reserve funds. So capital planning and reserves. As mentioned, the MGA has some many legislations, one being Section 283.1, where it requires municipalities to develop the operating and capital plan 3 to 5 years. And the use of reserves can support these municipalities in developing realistic and achievable capital plans and have some contingency funding for unforeseen economic instability. And I think the COVID pandemic, although we were quite fortunate here, we had a lot of measures in place, such as the plexiglass at the front and things like that, but those costs could have really gotten quite high or even more high than what we've already paid. That would be an example where this would come in. And asset management. So an important aspect of asset management is making long-term budgeting decisions with service levels and asset deterioration in mind. I know we're coming forward with an asset management plan in the near future, and this will even assist further with that planning of what needs to be put away for future capital and asset management. So how are reserves funded? As you know, there's approved budget contributions, which are designated transfers, additional designated transfers by council. Equipment sales revenue is one of the ways that we increase our fleet reserve, as well as through equipment rates. Carryover of current year's budget, so surplus funds. And also for projects that maybe, or items that weren't expended within the year. So maybe a project got carried over or canceled and we would not utilize those funds out of the reserve or would put them to the reserve. Some examples of some external sources of funding in addition to reserves would be, of course, government grants. We know that these are becoming less predictable than they have in the past. So, that's where reserve funds are important, that we have some in the background. Land sales revenues is another item that goes to the reserves, and donations if they're specific to a donated cause. So maybe we'll receive funds for a specific future purchase or a capital item, and we could put those funds into the reserve until such time as we would need them. Reserves can only be drawn on with prior approval. So this is done through the annual operating and capital budget. Projects that have been approved in previous budgets that maybe were carried forward, and by council resolution. We at the county, as per our reserve policy number 169, have 3 types of reserves. We have the operating reserves, capital reserves, and committed reserves. So operating reserves are those that are generally established to fund one-time expenditures or for an operating nature, such as maybe some admin building maintenance repairs that are outside of the normal maintenance budget. Capital reserves are those that are generally established to fund expenditures of a capital nature, support grant funding, and provide funding for capital deficits or for a specific purpose. And committed reserves have been established for very specific projects or long-term receivables such as local improvements and off-site levy. And those are determined by bylaw as well. These reserves are not considered for additional funding purposes. So in the case we set up, I guess it's like a receivable that the auditors had set up through the committed reserve. Once that local improvement is complete, that reserve is done and we wouldn't go back to it. We wouldn't continue to add funds to it. So this is just a summary. Now these, of course, are the balances prior to today's meeting, but this is just the operating portion. So we have like the donation reserve, drainage, community grant funds, tax equalization, emergency services, recreation, safety, snow removal, and so on. Our capital, so these are the ones that are more designated for larger projects. So the administrative building reserve, ASB, IT has a capital reserve for equipment, utilities fleet, the gravel pit reclamation, the commercial and industrial land, emergency services, the EARS program, and the public works capital projects reserve. And then these are the committed reserves. So we have, this year, the provincial policing funding was transferred to reserve because we haven't been invoiced in 2020, but we did collect funds for that, and I think the bill is coming in the next month. I understood it's supposed to be here by this month or early April.
I didn't get to tell you this, but some of the CAOs in the Region 2 had sent out an email a few days ago, and they are all waiting too with anticipation, and nobody's received it yet, so.
Okay. So the funds, we collected for them, and they're there, and we'll pay the bill out of that. That was something, it's committed, it was designated specifically for that purpose. The landfill Keydon Reserve, Market Access Network reserves, of course, those are very specific capital reserves. And then we've got our local improvement reserves. So just roughly our reserve total is just over 34 million, which means that I know Lauren has mentioned this in the past about having enough funds available in reserves to cover an annual budget or expenses if we need to. It's not legislated requirement, but it is good practice. Should things fall apart in a real hurry, at least we could get through a year's worth of business, or more or less. And that's sort of just general reserves.
Just, you had one listed up there called Riverbank something or other?
Riverbank.
Oh,
Riverbank. Riverbank, is, those were the two new ones that we just brought on this past year, 2020. Yeah, the bylaws were brought to council. Devin? Yeah.
Yeah, that was for the repaving of the road in Riverbank. There was a small portion of the improvement tax.
Okay. Yeah.
Jen, just like the reserves that you have, for example, the operating reserve stuff, is there a certain percentage that you have to have in reserve in order to legally, or that do any bylaws say that we have to have that?
We have a policy in place. I'm not aware of any legislation. I mean, it's good practice, recommended practice, but some municipalities, I believe probably, or some are villages within the province, aren't in a position to be legislated to put so many dollars into a reserve annually. So it does support, though, grant applications where, maybe 25% of that grant is the responsibility of the municipality, and it's good to prove that you have the funds there to come up with your 25%.
Mars?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. It is legislated that you can go only so high on your reserves or your surpluses, right?
I'd have to look into that,
Like when you do your
Morris.
budget.
Oh,
You
well,
can't budget really over.
we're legislated we can't have a surplus or a deficit when we budget. So if we're in a position where, we had a budgeted deficit, we would have to find a way to fund that for sure, or vice versa.
Any
Okay.
other questions?
So the
Go
next
right
one
ahead.
is just on municipal reserve, which was, as mentioned, the formal land trust, and just kind of how it's different from the other reserves we just went over. So within the Municipal Government Act, a municipality may request a landowner who is subdividing land to set aside a portion of their property as municipal and/or environmental reserve. Municipal reserve are lands that are acquired by the municipality for parks or recreation purposes, and that could just even be green space. Environmental reserves are generally to remain in their natural state and are important in providing for public access to water bodies and water courses. All reserve lands are owned and managed by the municipality.
So, go ahead, Klaus.
So on the one there, a landowner who's subdividing his land could set a portion aside, property for an environmental reserve. Would this person get paid for having to give up that portion of land?
That's probably a good Hillary question. I don't believe so. I think it's just part of the.
No, Councillor Vanderveen, you don't get, that's just part of the MGA, 10% of land rather than undeveloped land. It's because you don't get reimbursed for that.
And you guys are, it's interesting, because in Ontario, it's 5% in lieu of parkland for any subdivision, so it's a little bit less.
So before you leave that one, in BC, I don't know if you've been following the Douglas Lake Cattle Company episode. Is that going to be in Alberta too, do you think? Because the access to water is a huge issue there. They've closed it off completely, and it's been to court now. It's going for its 4th time, but it's all going to the Supreme Court this time. So Douglas Lake has won the right not to allow access to water bodies in their huge parcel of land. Yeah, Hillary, go ahead.
Under the MGA, you can't technically do that, so I haven't seen that happen in Alberta, where they
Oh.
cut off access. In the county, we've, if we try to maintain right-of-ways that go to river valleys, we don't close them off. So that's, so it says to provide access to, those lands, or if they subdivide them, get an environmental reserve to provide that, kind of more public good, to that amenity. But that's interesting. It'll probably come up at some point in time. I probably guarantee you that, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
So as Hillary kind of mentioned, if they're not putting aside that 10%, we get funds, and that's where that we can put into our other parks or recreation. So that's what makes up our municipal reserve. So, well, kind of got ahead of myself. How is it collected? Well, there you go. Any new subdivision, or as a new subdivision is proposed, the county has the opportunity to either obtain new reserve lands or money in lieu of land. So we kind of just touch on that, or a combination of the two. So the county's subdivision authority will determine the provisions of the new reserve lands at the time of the subdivision, and the guidelines regarding the reserve requirements are outlined within the Policy 179, which is the management of Lethbridge County Environmental and Municipal Reserve. We just refer to ours as municipal reserve. We don't say the environmental piece, so I'm kind of using the two terms, but municipal reserve is what the county references generally. So what is the purpose? So again, we kind of touched on this. So it's the management of municipal reserve land is intended to provide a suitable land base for the provision of recreation facilities for the use and enjoyment of county residents and the general public. Lethbridge County may provide or allow public recreation facilities on municipal reserve lands where there is sufficient interest and demand, as determined by the county. So typical facilities would include sports fields, play structures, picnic sites, rinks, trails, and associated facilities like washrooms, shelters, parking, etc. So the county may also work with local residents and community associations to address ongoing maintenance and upgrades to recreation facilities. Municipal reserve may provide important access links to other lands, including water access, and can offer undeveloped green spaces that act as buffers. So I guess it's not a written legislative thing, but something you can do.
That's how the MGA is written.
Yeah. So currently, at the end of the 2020, so the reserve balance moving forward was $705,000. In 2020, we received $89,115 in municipal reserve funds. We earned interest, less fees, of course, of just over $12,800, and we spent $110,690, and most of that went towards parks, like playground type parks in 2020. So that left a balance of $696,000, plus there's a $250,000 GIC designated to municipal reserve, and the policy states that we must keep at least that much of a balance in the GIC investment. So the total, including the GIC, is at $946,938 at the end of 2020. And that's short and
Any
sweet.
other questions?
Well,
Uh-oh. Go ahead, Claus.
So, worst case scenario, a lot of municipalities have, they're not allowed a deficit. So, and now with a lot of this linear income not coming by some of them, what would be the solution for some of them to not have a deficit? Because a lot of them are probably on the verge with not having the linear income anymore. You don't have to answer it, but I mean.
Yeah,
just as a
my
question.
guess
Yeah.
would be that they're going to have to increase taxes, access and utilize whatever grants they can get their hands on, and probably reach out to the government for some support if it's that significant. Whether or not they get it, I couldn't say, but those are some of the options. And then, of course, if they did have reserve funds, but lots of times, like the county and any other municipality, there's infrastructure deficits you're all facing, so you don't want to dip into reserves to fund operations all the time if you don't have to.
So just to follow up on what Claus asked you, could those places go back to being special areas? Do you think?
Oh, I don't know. I hadn't.
That's a great question. I don't know.
Oh,
Yeah, I don't know either.
Morris?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So you probably got a good feel how our financial situation is sitting as a county compared to others. Does it look healthy, or are we just borderline to where we should be?
Councillor Zeenstra, through the chair. I think, as council's aware, the county's in a unique position as far as what our main economic source is, which is agriculture, which is quite strong, obviously. The county has also been innovative with the business tax, which can help us support a lot of our capital projects and roads and bridges specifically. So even with some of the grant funding, being decreased or not as predictable as it has been in the past, I think it's a good sustainable source of funding for future capital projects. Our collections on taxes are generally quite high. We're in the mid to high 90s generally, which is also very good. So we're not facing a lot of tax sales annually. And we have minimal oil and gas. So although there is some lost revenue there that we'll have to bring forward to council when we apply for the PERC, I can't remember what that acronym stands for, but it's to help support some of the oil and gas revenue loss. So we are strong in those senses.
May, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, the way I'm looking at it down here, like I feel pretty comfortable for the surpluses we do have. I don't think it's anything alarmingly high. However, I think some of the ratepayers are going to be able to get these reports and they see these surpluses down there. I think we somewhat could be, facing up to some of the questions coming from those ratepayers. Hey, come on now, it looks like you guys could lower either the business tax or overall taxes. That possibility is there, and I think especially in an election year, I think that could come up.
Wow. Go ahead, Ann.
I think we have to be really cautious how we address this, and I think we're fortunate in a few ways. A lot of these, something I've observed anyway, a lot of these counties or other municipalities that have a lot of linear assessment, they aren't forced to be innovative, and when you don't have a lot of excess revenue, you are continually looking for ways for efficiencies. And I think that's something we really have to get out to our taxpayers. If we have a little bit of a surplus, it's because, this is what I'm saying. If you explain it like this, we have been very careful, and if there's a surplus, it's because we've continued to find efficiencies throughout the year.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thanks very much, Jen.
Thank you.
And we'll move on to administration and this policy 164, twinning relations. G 4.1.
Hello.
Hello.
As council's aware, we have been doing quite a few different policies and updates. So the one before you is the twinning policy. Council approved this policy on March 20th, 2014, And it was intended to establish the process for creating and maintaining twinning relationships with other communities and jurisdictions. So part of this was our relation with, and I hope I'm saying it right, Ann Young, China, yes. And there was a delegation in 2017 that went to China, and I believe they came back, traveled to Lethbridge County, and that was in 2017 as well. Is that correct?
They were here three or four times.
Yeah, yeah. So what we're trying to do, as you know, you've seen quite a few of these policies come forward, and we're just trying to update these policies. Given the current political situation, this report could have been very extensive, but I thought we should just stick to the policy itself. We would recommend that, where did I put my recommendation? That it remains as an active policy because we want to encourage relationships in the future. Leave it there.
Okay. Any questions or any thoughts? Go ahead, Claus.
Well, I don't think it hurts to keep this policy in place. And looking down at the financial impact, there is no financial impact, and if it would have been a financial impact with the twinning relationships that you had in the past, then probably maybe we would have made a change, but I don't think that's necessary now.
Any other comments?
I don't see why we could not change it at all. They won't be, the pandemic, the virus will get over sometime, and then we might want them to come back over. So I wouldn't want to break ties.
Okay, we need a motion to have it remain then. Morris?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I certainly think you want to keep the relationship open. Hopefully, it's going to be back again where we used to be, like and see some of those delegations, not necessarily just from China, but also from other places around the world, but had a lot of interest and, and really had a big curiosity, hey, what's really going on in our county? And that was great. And they know the numbers on the agriculture side of it, what we have in our county. And I think that's why we did have. And I'm sure it's somewhere down the line, it's going to be fairly active again from these countries, maybe showing interest coming this way again. And so, yes, I want to certainly put a lot of emphasis on to keep it open.
Any
And
other
I'll
comments?
move that.
Oh, yep. Any other comments? Seeing none, call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Let's move down to, thanks, Ann. Let's move down to county council attendance updates. So on February the 4th, had a town hall meeting with Premier Kenny and Minister Allard and Dr. Hinshaw. Ann and I attended that. On February the 5th, we had Mayors and Reeves. The 11th was Lethbridge County Council meeting. Also on the 11th, we met with the North County Potable Water Co-op Board. On the 12th, had a meeting with Ann. Same on the 17th. Also on the 17th, at the RMA AUMA President Summit on establishments of a provincial police service. And I see today that there's lots of activity of people, different municipalities sending letters saying that we do not approve or do not want the province to move away from the service which is currently being provided from the RCMP. On the 24th, had a virtual meeting with MLA Joseph Scow, and that was with Ann and Tori. And on the 25th, we had a joint public hearing with the county and the Colehurst for the amendment of the IDP. On the 26th, had another meeting with Ann. The 26th also was Alberta Council Budget Information Session. Alberta Council Budget Information Session. 26-2, the virtual provincial police force discussion with Minister Hunter and MLA Newdorf. And that was with Ann and Tori as well. And then the 26th, there was a telephone call with Premier Jason Kennedy and Minister Rick McGuire, and that's Ann and myself.
And that was really nice that they did that on Friday night at 6:30. We
Yeah, it
appreciate
was a heck of a good way to spend Friday evening, yes. Yeah, go ahead, Claude.
I just got a question on the police force thing. You had the conversation with Minister Hunter and Neudorf. What I'm hearing now is that it looks like the government is kind of ignoring all the people that we're talking about, and that they are wanting to move ahead with what they have. Is that correct, or is
So according to Minister Madhu, at the day of that happening, no, it's not written in stone, and no, they haven't set the course of direction. But I guess going through the meeting, I'm not too sure I completely believe that. And today on the news on this morning, I heard how the Premier was saying that within the next 3 weeks, he will be talking about the reforms to Alberta's pension plan and how they, I assume, would be moving away from the federal pension plan and starting an Alberta one.
One of the things, too, to answer your question, Councillor Van der Veen, is there's supposed to be a report coming out at the end of April, was it, Reeve Hickey?
Yeah.
Yes, which will determine where they go with the provincial police force. However, I do say there is a groundswell of support against what's happening now, so these letter writing campaigns will hopefully make an impact.
Hasn't there been some kind of a survey going on too, and that was the majority of the survey wanted to stick with what we had?
That was part of the session, the 3-hour policing session that was put on by AUMA and RMA, and that through that process, 85% said they wanted to continue on with the RCMP.
Yes. Yeah. Any other questions? Tori, Division 2.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. February 11th, County Council meeting. That day we also met with the North County Potable Water Co-op Board. The 24th, we, as Lauren said, we met virtually with MLA Shao. 25th, joint public hearing with the town of Colehurst. And the 26th, we had a virtual discussion. Nathan Newdorf joined us here, and we met virtually with Grant Hunter at the same time. And maybe just to, on the back of what Claus said, just with these, I think what's happening with these surveys, and we're hearing these numbers, I think the panel, the Fair Deal panel that was commissioned by the government, they have their findings and their survey results. And I think what I'm seeing anyways is that those results don't necessarily mirror what we're seeing as municipalities and what our associations, the AUMA and the RMA, I think the survey results they're seeing don't necessarily mirror each other. So I think there's some conflicting information that way, just because it was represented in the Fair Deal panel one way. Public opinion might not mirror that. So I think that's some of the confusion. And I think we just tried to do our best to just keep the MLAs in the loop as to where we were. Obviously, concerns that we would have moving forward with a provincial police service. Obviously, with the downloading that's taken place, the costs that we're now bearing for policing, just try and convey all those messages that we've been, I think, beating a pretty steady drum to this point, that we have concern that those costs could potentially skyrocket. I think there is obviously some benefits to possibly having more control with policing and more input, and I hope that if nothing else out of this whole ordeal, that comes to the forefront, where we can have, as municipalities and as a province, have a greater control in policing. But yeah, I think we shall see. I think there's definitely different opinions on that, but I think our MLAs were open to the discussion and were more than willing to hear what we had to say, which was greatly appreciated.
Any questions? Bob?
Okay, February 11th, Lethbridge County Council meeting. February 11th, meeting with Lethbridge Northern County Portable Water Commission, or co-op. Okay, February 25th, joint public hearing with County of Colehurst Amendment to IDP. And the 25th was this virtual South Grove Strategic Planning Session.
Any questions for Bob? Seeing none, let's move down to 4. Ken?
Lethbridge Council meeting on the 11th and meeting with county potable water co-op.
Any questions for Ken? No. Division 5, Steve?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. February 10th, Exhibition Park Board meeting, the 11th, County Council meeting, and North County Potable Water Co-op Board meeting. February 23rd, Community Futures meeting, and 25th had the joint public hearing with Colehurst on the IDP amendment. And on the Exhibition Park, I think it's March 31st or 30th will be the official groundbreaking ceremony. It was just depending on if they can get everyone lined up to come that day, but so that's coming up. Otherwise, they've just been doing some test pilings and stuff like that, so light construction has sort of started there.
Any questions for Steve? No. Claus? Division 6?
Yeah, it's good to hear, Steve, that that's going ahead and that everything's on track. February 11th, I had County Council meeting. February 11th, I had North County Potable Water Co-op. And the 17th, Economic Development Lethbridge. And next week, Wednesday, we're going to have an AGM with the Economic Development. And the 25th, I had a joint here in Colehurst and County. And 26th, we had a SEWA board meeting, and with that, we were not successful in some millions of dollars that we applied for innovation. And that, basically, the money was going to be starting for trying to hire a project manager and going from there. This apparently is not happening. There were some voices that went up of trying to get some federal support for that. And personally, I think that we should not go that route. I don't think we're going to get that, and I think it's going to take years and years before you ever get anything. And by the way, we are in the province of Alberta, and I don't think that goes very well on the federal level to try to get anything done. So, and I talked to Tori about it a couple of days ago too, and so what we could be doing now is going to some investors. There were quite a few that were interested in investing in the project. So I say put your money where your mouth is, and let's see that we get this thing off the road. We have elections coming up in October. Some of the founding members of the SEWA are stepping down because they're done with their terms and they don't want to seek re-election. And so coming on with all new people there, you just would have to start from scratch again. So I think I'm going to push really hard for the private investment, that we get stuff done. The advantage that we're going to have out of that is that we, of course, we can sell our engineering, and that is a substantial amount. And that way we can kind of get back to the municipalities that have put a lot of effort and everything in there. Plus that, I think that to do the right thing, because it's for the environment, it's great not having the landfills anymore. And if we can just move ahead with that and get the incinerator going, get our steam energy, get our electric energy out of the thing, and then in the end, I think that we have accomplished for what we started working for, what we worked so hard for it to get done. Because I think that if we're going to be waiting longer, I think it's going to be crumbling, and I really don't want that to happen. Any questions?
Thanks. Any questions for Claus? Seeing none? Morris.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. February 11th, Lethbridge County Council meeting. February 11th, meeting with the Lethbridge North County Potable Water Co-op Board. And February 25th, joint public hearing with the county and the Colehurst amendment to IDP.
Any questions for Morris? Need a motion to accept for information? Steve, all in favor? Opposed, carried. We need a motion to go into a closed session. Morris, all in favor? Opposed, carried. Turn off the,
For my mask. I didn't mean it like that. I said my ears hurt. That is from the.
Couple of motions, and that is for number one, we need to go with the recommendation as presented. That's pretty vague, I know, sorry.
I would make that motion, Mr. Chairman.
You need two motions for that, Hamlet? Just, yeah, but they're separate. So, the recommendation is to go with, the motion is to go with the recommendation that was provided to us. Any further discussion? Call the question, all in favor? Both? And the second one, I'm not sure what we came to a conclusion on.
Oh, I believe. Wait, sorry.
I believe you wanted to go with the recommendation.
Yeah, that was my understanding, the recommendation.
Okay. So then, same thing, you go with recommendation provided.
Yep.
All vote so. Morris?
That was my recollection.
Any discussion?